The letter in my hand wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a foreclosure notice in disguise, wrapped in polite corporate language. The heating vent above the counter rattled, coughing out a pathetic stream of lukewarm air that did nothing to combat the Chicago winter pressing against the glass display windows. I stared at the logo at the top of the invoice. Green Dragon Holdings. They had acquired my primary fertilizer supplier 3 days ago, and their first order of business had been to triple the cost of the nitrogen-rich blend I needed for the hothouse orchids. I set the paper down on the granite countertop, smoothing the crease with my thumb. My bank account balance was already hovering in the double digits. If I paid this invoice, I wouldn't be able to pay the electric bill for the climate control systems in the back. If I didn't pay it, the suppliers would cut me off, and the orchids, my father's legacy, the only thing that made this shop unique in a city full of generic florists, would wither within a week. It was a math problem with no solution. I picked up the pruning shears, the cold metal grounding me. Work. That was the only answer. Just keep working until the lights go out. I turned my attention to a bucket of hydrangeas that had just arrived, their blue heads bobbing slightly as I pulled them from the water to trim the stems. The shop was quiet, filled only with the scent of damp earth and cut greens. A smell that usually calmed me but today felt suffocating. The chime above the door rang, a sharp, cheerful sound that felt out of place with my mood. I didn't look up immediately, focusing on cutting a stem at a perfect 45-degree angle. "Good afternoon, Emily." The voice was deep, smooth, and familiar enough to make my pulse jump in a way that had nothing to do with the stress of unpaid bills. I set the shears down and looked up. Nicholas Rinaldi stood in the doorway, bringing a gust of freezing wind in with him before the door clicked shut. He looked like he always did. Impeccable. He wore a charcoal suit that fit his broad shoulders, as if it had been stitched directly onto his body, paired with a black overcoat that absorbed the weak afternoon light. He didn't look like a man who bought flowers. He looked like a man who bought buildings, or cities. Yet, for the past 6 months, he had been coming in here every Tuesday and Thursday, buying elaborate arrangements that I suspected he threw away the moment he turned the corner. "Mr. Rinaldi," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. "You're late. Usually you're here by 2. He walked toward the counter, his movements fluid and predatory in a way that usually unnerved new customers. He didn't walk. He occupied space. He stopped right in front of the register, his dark brown eyes scanning my face with an intensity that made me feel like he was reading the fine print of my soul. "Business ran long," Nicholas said, unbuttoning his coat. "I see you're still keeping the temperature in here fit for penguins." "It keeps the flowers fresh," I lied. The truth was I had lowered the thermostat to save money. "What can I get for you today?" "We have some excellent amaryllis that just came in." Nicholas didn't look at the flowers. He looked at the invoice I had left on the counter. His gaze lingered on the Green Dragon logo for a fraction of a second too long before snapping back to me. "No amaryllis," he said. "Give me something. Resilient. Something that survives the cold. Everything survives if you take care of it properly." I replied automatically, moving around the counter to the display fridge. I could feel his eyes on my back, a physical weight. "How about winter jasmine? It's tough. Surprise me," he said. I busied myself with the arrangement, grateful for the distraction. There was something different about him today. Usually Nicholas was calm, almost bored with the world, carrying an air of detached amusement. Today, he seemed coiled. His fingers drummed a silent, agitated rhythm on the granite counter. He kept glancing at the street outside the window, his jaw set tight. "Is everything okay, Mr. Rinaldi?" I asked, securing the jasmine with twine. He stopped drumming. "I told you to call me Nicholas, Emily." "And yes, just a lot of noise in the city lately." "Pests." "Pests?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "Like rats?" "Something like that," he murmured, his voice dropping an octave. "Big rats." I finished the bouquet and wrapped it in brown butcher paper. When I turned back to hand it to him, he was closer than I expected, leaning over the counter. He wasn't looking at the flowers. He was looking at a bruise on my wrist where I had banged it against the delivery van door earlier that morning. "What happened there?" he asked, his voice losing its casual tone. "Clumsy," I said, pulling my sleeve down. I fought a door. The door won. He didn't smile. He reached out, his hand hovering near my arm without touching it, as if he wanted to inspect the damage but restrained himself. You should be more careful. Fragile things break easily. I'm not fragile, Nicholas, I said, my voice firmer than I intended. And I'm not a flower. A corner of his mouth ticked up. No, you're definitely not. He pulled a money clip from his pocket, peeling off $300 bills. It was too much, as always. The bouquet is $40, I said. Keep the change. Put it toward the heating bill, he said, nodding at the vent that was still rattling. Before I could argue or throw the money back at him for his arrogance, the door chime rang again. This time, it wasn't a customer. It was a courier I didn't recognize, a young guy in a heavy motorcycle jacket, helmet visor down, holding a long, narrow black box. He didn't speak. He walked straight to the counter, placed the box directly in front of me, and turned on his heel. Wait, who is this from? I called out. The courier didn't stop. He was out the door and mounting a black sports bike before the door had even fully closed. The engine roared, and he tore off down the street, weaving dangerously through traffic. Rude, I muttered, looking at the box. It was elegant. I had to give it that. The cardboard was thick, matte black, and expensive to the touch. There was no card attached, no label, just the box. Nicholas had gone very still. He hadn't moved away from the counter, but his posture had shifted. The relaxed lean was gone. He was standing at full height, his body angled slightly toward the door, shielding me without making it obvious. Open it, Nicholas said. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. I frowned at him. I intend to. It's probably samples from a new wholesaler. Maybe someone who doesn't charge extortionate rates for nitrogen. I reached for the lid. The box wasn't taped shut. It was tied with a cord. A silk cord. It was silver and black, braided together in a complicated, beautiful pattern I had never seen before. I tugged at the knot, but it was tight. Here, Nicholas said. He produced a small silver pocket knife from his coat, flicked it open, and severed the cord in one clean motion. He was staring at the knot with an expression I couldn't place. Recognition? Disgust? I lifted the lid. Inside, resting on a bed of black velvet, was a single flower. It was a chrysanthemum. A large white spider chrysanthemum with long spindly petals that curled inward. But it wasn't pure white. The tips of the petals had been carefully, meticulously dipped in red paint, or dye. The contrast was striking. The stark white, the violent red, the black velvet. I stared at it, a cold shiver running down my spine that had nothing to do with the shop's temperature. Well, I said, forcing a laugh that sounded brittle even to my own ears. That's certainly a choice. Nicholas didn't laugh. He was staring into the box as if it contained a live cobra. His face had gone pale, a stark contrast to his dark hair. The muscle in his jaw jumped. Do you know what this is? He asked, his voice dangerously quiet. It's a chrysanthemum, I said, reaching out to touch one of the petals. The red substance was dry. Paint. Definitely paint. In the floral industry, we call these spider mums. But sending a white one, that's bad etiquette. Why? Nicholas asked. He wasn't looking at me. He was scanning the street outside the window, his eyes darting back and forth. Because in Japanese culture, white chrysanthemums are for funerals, I explained, trying to sound academic to cover my growing unease. They represent death, grief. You put them on graves. You don't send them in a gift box. And the red tips, it's artistic, I suppose. But it looks like blood. It's morbid. Someone has a very twisted sense of humor. I tried to pick up the flower to inspect the stem, but Nicholas's hand shot out, grabbing my wrist. His grip was hard, painful. Don't touch it, he hissed. Nicholas, you're hurting me, I said, trying to pull away. It's just a flower. It's a prank. Probably from the old competition down on 5th Street. It's not a prank, Emily, he said. He released my wrist but didn't step back. He reached into the box, not touching the flower, but picking up the severed pieces of the cord he had cut. He held the silk up to the light. "Look at the weave," he said. "Black silk over silver core. This isn't a gift ribbon. It's a ranking cord. And this isn't a decorative bow." I looked at the cord. Now that he mentioned it, the material was heavy, like the braiding on a uniform. "So, it's a fancy string. What are you talking about?" Nicholas looked at me then, and the look in his eyes stopped my heart. It wasn't the smooth, charming look he usually gave me. It was raw, terrified, and furious. It was the look of a man watching a building collapse with someone he loved inside. "It's a mizuhiki knot, tied in the cut-off style," Nicholas said, the words coming out like gravel. "It's a message from the Yamaguchi clan. The white chrysanthemum is the funeral. The red paint is the promise of how it happens. It means you have been marked. It means the clock has started." I took a step back, bumping into the display fridge behind me. "Yamaguchi? Like, the Yakuza? You're talking about the Mafia?" "Nicholas, this is a flower shop. I sell daisies to grandmothers. I have $300 in my bank account. Why would a Japanese crime syndicate care about me? Because they want the block," Nicholas said, his voice rising. "They want the territory. They don't care about your daisies. They care that you own the lease on a strategic corner. They sent this to tell you that negotiations are over before they even started." My brain struggled to catch up. The cars outside, the men in suits I had seen lingering near the alleyway last week, the aggressive offer from the fertilizer company, Green Dragon Holdings, I whispered. "The company that bought my supplier." "A front," Nicholas snapped. "They're squeezing you out. And because you haven't sold, because you haven't left," he gestured violently at the box. "They sent this." "Okay," I said, my hands starting to tremble. "Okay, so it's a threat. I'll call the police. I'll show them the box." "The police?" Nicholas let out a harsh bark-like laugh. "The police will file a report for harassment and tell you to get a restraining order against John Doe. By the time they file the paperwork, this shop will be ashes, and you will be inside it." "Then what do I do?" I shouted back, panic finally cracking my voice. "If it's that serious, I'll just lock the door. I'll go home." "You think home is safe?" Nicholas stepped closer, invading my personal space, radiating heat and anger. "You think a lock on a door stops them? They just told you they are going to kill you, Emily. This isn't a game." He looked at the flower again, and something inside him seemed to snap. The control he always wore like a second skin evaporated. The calm, collected businessman was gone. In his place was something violent and terrifying. "Who gave you that flower?" he roared. I flinched. "I told you, it was a courier, a guy on a bike." "What did he look like? Did you see his face? Did he speak?" Nicholas was shouting now, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "No, he had a helmet. Nicholas, stop, you're scaring me." "I should be scaring you," he yelled. "You should be terrified. You're standing there talking about etiquette and police while a blade is hanging over your neck." He spun around, grabbing the heavy oak display table in the center of the room, a solid piece of furniture that weighed at least 200 pounds, covered in vases and potted succulents. With a roar of pure, unadulterated rage, he didn't just shove it. He lifted one side and flipped it. The sound was deafening. The heavy wood crashed onto the tiled floor, splintering down the middle. Glass vases shattered, sending shards flying like shrapnel. Clay pots exploded, scattering dirt and succulents across the room. The water from the vases splashed over his expensive Italian shoes, soaking the hem of his trousers. I screamed, covering my head with my arms, pressing myself flat against the cold glass of the fridge door. Silence followed the crash. Absolute, ringing silence, broken only by the sound of a single ceramic shard spinning to a halt on the floor. Nicholas stood amidst the wreckage, his chest heaving. His hands were still balled into fists, his knuckles white. He wasn't looking at the destruction he had caused. He was looking at me. His eyes were wide, wild, and filled with a desperate, agonizing fear that shook me more than the violence itself. "Who gave you that flower?" he whispered, the question coming out like a plea this time. "I don't know," I sobbed, sliding down the fridge door until I hit the floor. I don't know, Nicholas. Please. He stared at me for a second longer, breathing hard, as if realizing what he had just done. He looked at the shattered glass, the ruined plants, and then back at me, cowering on the floor. He closed his eyes for a brief moment, taking a deep, shuddering breath. When he opened them, the wildness was gone. It was replaced by a cold, steely resolve that was infinitely more terrifying. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a black phone. He didn't look at it as he dialed. He kept his eyes fixed on the street outside. "This is Rinaldi," he said into the phone, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. Code red. Location: Emily's Blooms on 4th. I want the armored unit here in 3 minutes. I want the perimeter locked down. I want every camera on this block pulled. He listened for a second, then cut the person off. I don't care about the exposure. Burn the protocol. We have a target on the civilian. He paused, looking at me huddled on the floor. She's with me. If anyone gets within 50 feet of this shop who isn't on my payroll, put them in the ground. He hung up the phone and slipped it back into his pocket. He stepped over the wreckage of the table, his shoes crunching on the broken glass, and walked toward me. He didn't look like a customer anymore. He didn't look like a friend. He looked like a soldier entering a war zone. He crouched down in front of me, ignoring the water soaking into his suit pants. He reached out, his hand steady now, and cupped my face. His thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped my eye. "Get up, Emily," he said softly. "You broke my table," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'll buy you a new table," he said. "I'll buy you a new shop. I'll buy you the whole damn city if that's what it takes. But right now, you need to get up. Because we are leaving." "Leaving?" I asked. "Where?" Nicholas looked deep into my eyes, and for the first time I saw the truth of who he was. Not just a rich man. Not just a powerful man. A dangerous man. "To the only place where they can't touch you," he said. "You're under my protection now." He stood up and extended his hand to me. I looked at it. I looked at the destroyed shop, the white chrysanthemum sitting innocently in its box on the counter, and the man standing before me offering safety with a hand that had just smashed my livelihood to pieces. I took his hand. The silence in the shop was heavy, pressing against my eardrums like deep water. A moment ago, the sound of splintering oak had filled the air, but now the only noise was the hum of the display fridge and the jagged breathing of the man standing amidst the wreckage. Nicholas Rinaldi didn't look at the debris of the table he had just destroyed. He was adjusting the cuffs of his suit jacket, his movements terrifyingly precise, as if he hadn't just unleashed a whirlwind of violence in a room full of fragile things. I stared at his hip. The movement of his jacket had revealed a leather holster clipped to his belt, housing a gun that looked far too utilitarian to be a fashion statement. It was matte black, sleek, and undeniably lethal. "Lock the door, Emily," Nicholas said. His voice had dropped the shouting. It was now a low, flat command that brokered no argument. "You have a gun," I said, the words feeling strange in my mouth. I didn't move. My brain was still trying to bridge the gap between Nicholas the wealthy customer and Nicholas the man who carried a firearm into a florist shop. "I have several," he corrected, his eyes scanning the street outside the window again. "And right now, you need to step away from the glass and lock the front door. Do it now." I scrambled to my feet, my boots crunching on shards of ceramic and glass. I hurried to the entrance, turning the deadbolt and flipping the sign to closed. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the keys. When I turned back, Nicholas was already moving. He wasn't looking at me. He was walking the perimeter of the shop, checking the back exit, peering through the blinds of the side window. "Nicholas," I said, trying to find my voice. "You need to tell me what is going on. You can't just smash my furniture and start giving orders. Who are you?" He stopped near the counter, picking up the black box with the chrysanthemum. He didn't touch the flower, but he looked at it with a mix of hatred and cold calculation. "You know who I am," he said, turning to face me. "You've lived in Chicago your whole life. You know the name Rinaldi." I felt a cold flush wash over me. I did know the name. Everyone knew the name. The Rinaldis were construction magnates, real estate developers, owners of shipping logistics. But in the quiet whispers of the neighborhood, in the rumors that circulated when union leaders disappeared or businesses suddenly changed hands, the name meant something else entirely. It meant the outfit. It meant the people you called when the police couldn't, or wouldn't, help. I thought that was just gossip, I whispered. I thought you were in logistics. I am in logistics, Nicholas said, his face unreadable. I move things. I protect things. And right now, the thing I need to move and protect is you. He walked over to where I was standing and placed a hand on my shoulder. His grip was firm, grounding. He wasn't hurting me, but he was making sure I couldn't step away. Listen to me closely, he said, his dark eyes locking onto mine. That flower isn't a prank. The knot on that cord is a mizuhiki, tied in a variation used exclusively by the Yamaguchi Gumi. It's a message sent to business owners who refuse to sell. It signifies a funeral. Specifically, yours. But why? I asked, frustration warring with fear. I'm nobody. I have debt. I have wilted hydrangeas. Why would the Yakuza want me dead? They don't want you dead, specifically. They want you gone, Nicholas explained, his tone clinical but urgent. They are buying this entire block to build a distribution hub for their imports. Everyone else on this street has already sold or been scared off. You are the last holdout. That flower means the negotiation phase is over. The red paint on the petals, that means you have 24 hours before they burn this place down with you inside it. I looked around the shop. My father had bought this building 30 years ago. Every shelf, every nail, every creaky floorboard held a memory of him. The idea that strangers in suits were planning to torch it simply because I hadn't signed a piece of paper made my stomach turn. I saw them, I realized, the memory surfacing. Last week, 3 men in black suits standing across the street taking photos. I thought they were assessors for the bank. One of them, he had tattoos coming up his neck. Under the collar, Yakuza, Nicholas confirmed. They've been watching you, assessing your routine. And today, they decided to start the clock. So I call the police, I said, pointing to the phone. I show them the flower. I tell them about the threat. Nicholas shook his head slowly. The police can't stop a firebombing at 3 a.m, Emily. And even if they patrol the street, the Yamaguchi don't work like street thugs. They are precise. If you stay here tonight, you die. It is a statistical certainty. He checked his watch. My team is 3 minutes out. Pack a bag. Essentials only. Documents, medication, phone. Leave the rest. Leave? I pulled away from him. I can't just leave. This is my livelihood. This is everything I have. Your life is what you have, Nicholas snapped, his patience fraying. The shop is brick and mortar. It can be rebuilt. You cannot. It's not just brick and mortar, I yelled back, surprising both of us. The orchids in the back greenhouse, the Cattleya hybrids. My father spent 40 years breeding that specific strain. They don't exist anywhere else in the world. They need specific humidity, specific feed. If I leave them, they die. If they die, I lose the only thing I have left of him. I'm not leaving them to be burned by some gangsters. Nicholas stared at me. For a second, I thought he was going to pick me up and carry me out over his shoulder. I braced myself for it, but he didn't. He looked at my face, saw the stubborn set of my jaw, and the desperation in my eyes. He wasn't looking at a damsel. He was looking at a business owner defending her assets. He let out a short, sharp breath through his nose. How many? What? The orchids, he said, pulling his phone out again. How many plants are we talking about? 5? 50? About 30 pots of the hybrids. And the mother plant, I said quickly. But they are heavy. Clay pots. They need a temperature-controlled van. Nicholas dialed a number, his eyes never leaving mine. Change of plans. He barked into the phone. I need the transport unit. Yes, the box truck with the climate seals. Bring the extraction crew. We are moving inventory. He paused, listening. I don't care if it slows us down. We take the inventory. Get it done. He hung up and looked at me. You have 10 minutes before the transport gets here. Show me which ones need to go. Start tagging them. I didn't waste time saying thank you. I ran to the back of the shop, grabbing a roll of red warning tape. Nicholas followed me, shedding his expensive overcoat and tossing it onto a workbench. These ones, I said, pointing to the row of delicate spotted orchids on the top shelf, and the large one in the corner. That's the mother plant. Nicholas Rinaldi, the man who wore suits that cost more than my delivery van, rolled up his sleeves and got to work. He didn't complain about the dirt. He didn't ask why I cared so much about plants. He simply lifted the heavy clay pots with an ease that betrayed immense physical strength, moving them to the loading bay door. "You're not just a florist, are you?" he asked as he set down a massive pot. Most people would be crying in the corner. "I can cry later," I said, wrapping protective burlap around a delicate bloom. "Crying doesn't pay the invoices, and it doesn't save the inventory." "Good," Nicholas said. There was a note of approval in his voice. Panic is useless. Action is what keeps you breathing. A heavy pounding on the back loading door made me jump. "That's my team," Nicholas said. "Open it." I hit the button for the roller door. As it rattled up, revealing the gray, slush-covered alleyway, I expected to see guys in leather jackets. Instead, 4 men in tactical gear, black cargo pants, heavy vests, and earpieces, stood there. Behind them was a sleek, unmarked black box truck and a massive armored SUV that looked like a tank disguised as a luxury car. "Clear the perimeter," Nicholas ordered. "Load the tagged plants into the truck. Secure them with shock-absorbent padding. If a single stem breaks, you're buying the lady a new greenhouse." "Yes, boss," the men chorused in unison. They moved like a swarm of efficient ants. They didn't treat the flowers like decorations. They treated them like high-value cargo. I watched as they carefully loaded my father's legacy into the truck. One of the men, a giant with a shaved head, cradled a pot as if it were a bomb he was trying not to detonate. "The rest of the shop?" one of the men asked Nicholas. "Leave it," Nicholas said. "We can't save the daisies, but set the alarms to silent trigger. If anyone breaches the door after we leave, I want to know about it." Nicholas turned to me. "The truck will take the plants to my private hangar. It's climate-controlled. They will be safe there. Now you get in the car with me." I grabbed my purse and my laptop bag. I took one last look at the empty shelves where the orchids had been. The front of the shop was still a mess of broken glass and the ruined table. It looked like a crime scene. Maybe it was. "Come," Nicholas said, his hand on the small of my back, guiding me toward the SUV. "We are exposed out here." I climbed into the back seat of the SUV. The door was heavy, solid steel disguised with leather trim. As Nicholas slammed it shut, the sound of the city, the distant sirens, the wind, the traffic, vanished instantly. It was airtight. Nicholas climbed in beside me. "Go," he said to the driver. The engine purred, a deep, powerful rumble, and the car pulled away smoothly. I watched through the tinted window as my shop disappeared from view. I didn't know if I would ever see it again. The thought should have terrified me. But strangely, the presence of the man beside me acted as a bizarre anchor. Nicholas was typing furiously on his phone. "I've put a 24-hour detail on your apartment as well," he said without looking up. "Just in case they try to hit your home to send a message. But you aren't going there." "Where are we going?" I asked. "You said a safe place." "My penthouse," he said. "It's in the spire. Top 3 floors. Private elevator. Reinforced structure. Independent air filtration. It's the safest place in Chicago." "Sounds like a fortress," I muttered. "It is," he replied. He finally put the phone down and looked at me. The adrenaline of the shop seemed to have faded, leaving him looking tired, but intense. "I'm sorry about the table, Emily. I don't usually lose control like that." "You were scared," I observed. It was a bold thing to say to a mafia boss, but I saw the truth of it in his eyes earlier. He didn't deny it. The Yamaguchi are not precise because they are honorable. They are precise because they are efficient butchers. When I saw that knot, all I could see was what they do to people who don't listen. He paused, his jaw tightening. "I wasn't going to let that happen to you." "Because I'm a client?" I asked. He looked at me for a long moment. the silence stretching between us in the confined space of the car. No, not because you are a client. He didn't elaborate, and I didn't push. The air in the car felt charged, thick with unspoken things. I turned my gaze back to the window. We were driving through the financial district now, the tall buildings looming like sentinels in the gray afternoon. Green Dragon Holdings, I said, my mind going back to the practicalities. They own the supplier. They own the shipping company that delayed my tulip bulbs last month. It's all connected, isn't it? It's not just territory. It's the supply chain. Nicholas looked at me with renewed interest. You noticed the shipping delays? I notice everything that affects my margins, I said. 3 shipments lost in customs. Fertilizer prices up 200%. They aren't just buying buildings. They are choking the local businesses, so we beg them to buy us out. Economic siege warfare. Nicholas nodded. Standard tactic. But they made a mistake. What mistake? They assumed you were alone, Nicholas said grimly. They assumed you were just a florist with debt and no connections. They didn't know you were under my protection. I wasn't under your protection until 20 minutes ago, I pointed out. You were, he said softly, almost to himself. You just didn't know it. The car turned into an underground ramp, descending deep beneath one of the tallest skyscrapers in the city. Concrete walls blurred past. We passed 2 checkpoints with armed guards who nodded at the driver. This wasn't just a luxury apartment building. It was a compound. The car stopped in a private garage bay. The doors unlocked with a heavy clack. We're here, Nicholas said. We took an elevator that had no buttons, only a biometric scanner. Nicholas pressed his hand against the panel, and the doors slid shut. The ascent was so smooth I could barely feel it, but my ears popped as we climbed 60 stories in seconds. The doors opened directly into a living space that was larger than my entire shop and apartment combined. It was breathtaking, yes. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the entire city, marble floors, modern art that probably cost millions. But it was also cold. Not temperature cold, but emotionally cold. It looked like a museum, not a home. Everything was gray, black, and white. No color. No life. Don't touch the windows, Nicholas said as he walked in. They are electrified if the alarm is triggered. Charming, I said, clutching my laptop bag. The guest suite is down the hall to the right, he gestured. It has everything you need. Clothes, toiletries. If you need something else, ask the house staff. But do not leave this floor. The elevator will not work for you. I stood in the middle of the vast living room, feeling very small and very out of place in my dirt-stained apron and work boots. But then I remembered the invoice in my bag, the deadline. Nicholas, I said. He stopped halfway to what I assumed was his office. Yes? I need the Wi-Fi password, I said. He blinked, clearly surprised. The Wi-Fi password? You just escaped a death threat, and you want to check your email? I have pending orders for tomorrow, I said, my voice steady. I need to cancel them. I need to email the event planner for the Miller wedding and tell them I can't deliver the centerpieces. If I don't cancel, I'll be liable for breach of contract. I can't afford a lawsuit on top of a death threat. Nicholas stared at me. A slow, genuine smile spread across his face, the first real smile I had seen since he smashed my table. It wasn't the polite smile of a customer. It was a smile of respect. Network is Rinaldi secure, he said. Password is Omerta, capital O. Omerta, I repeated dryly. Code of silence. Very subtle. I'm a traditionalist, he shrugged. Cancel your orders, Emily. But don't worry about the penalties. Anyone who sues you answers to me. He turned and walked into his office, closing the door behind him. I was left alone in the silent glass castle. I looked out at the city below, a sprawling grid of lights beginning to flicker on in the twilight. Somewhere down there, men with tattoos were probably pouring gasoline on my front porch. Somewhere down there, my old life was ending. I walked to the nearest couch, sat down, and opened my laptop. I had work to do. The silence of the 64th floor was different from the silence of my shop. In the shop, silence was heavy with the scent of damp earth and the subtle living respiration of thousands of plants. Here, the silence was sterilized. It smelled of ozone, polished marble, and expensive leather. It was the silence of a vacuum. hermetically sealed against the chaos of the world below. 3 days. That was how long I had been a guest, or a prisoner, depending on the hour of the day, in Nicholas Rinaldi's fortress in the sky. To keep from climbing the glass walls, I had designated myself the caretaker of the one living thing in the penthouse that wasn't wearing a holster: the winter garden. It was a glass-enclosed atrium off the main living area, filled with neglected tropical plants that looked like they hadn't seen a watering can since the building was dedicated. I was currently knee-deep in a ficus tree that had been struggling to breathe, wiping layers of dust off its broad, waxy leaves. The physical labor was grounding. It reminded me that I was still Emily Mitchell, florist and business owner, not just a witness in a federal protection program that hadn't actually been sanctioned by the feds. You're going to kill it with that much attention. I didn't jump. I was getting used to the way Nicholas materialized in rooms without making a sound. The thick carpets absorbed his footsteps, but I had started to sense the shift in air pressure when he entered. I turned on the small step stool. Nicholas was standing in the doorway of the atrium, leaning against the glass frame. He had shed the suit jacket, his white dress shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled up to his elbows. He looked tired. Not the physical exhaustion of manual labor, but the deep, bone-weary fatigue of a man playing a chess game where the pieces were made of dynamite. Plants breathe through their leaves, I said, holding up the damp cloth I had found in the kitchen. This dust is suffocating them. It's blocking the photosynthesis. You have a $10,000 irrigation system installed in here, but nobody bothered to wipe the leaves. I have staff for that, Nicholas said, watching me step down. Your staff is afraid to touch anything, I countered. I saw the housekeeper yesterday. She vacuums around the pots like they might explode. In my line of work, checking for explosives is a valid precaution, he replied dryly. He walked over to where I was standing, invading my personal space with that casual arrogance that seemed to be his default setting. He reached out and touched a leaf I had just cleaned. It looks greener. That's the point, I said. Why do you have this room, Nicholas? You don't seem like the type to sit here and meditate among the ferns. He looked around the atrium, his expression unreadable. It came with the specs. The architect said it would humanize the space, make it less predatory. He failed, I said honestly. The rest of the apartment still looks like a Bond villain's lair. But the plants have potential. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. It was the first time I had seen him relax in 48 hours. Since he had brought me here, he had been a whirlwind of hushed phone calls, encrypted emails, and meetings with men who looked like they chewed gravel for breakfast. I had stayed out of his way, canceling my orders, emailing my clients with a fabricated story about a family emergency, and trying not to think about the white chrysanthemum sitting in the trash back at the shop. I'm hungry, Nicholas said abruptly, changing the subject. The staff left for the night. I was going to order something. Takeout again? I wrinkled my nose. We've had Thai, sushi, and Italian in 3 days. I'm starting to feel like a sodium experiment. I don't cook, Emily. I eat fuel. I sighed, untying the makeshift apron I had fashioned from a spare towel. You have a kitchen that rivals a Michelin star restaurant. 6 burners, a convection oven, copper pots that have never seen a flame. It's a tragedy. I walked past him toward the kitchen. Sit down. I'll make something that doesn't come in a plastic container. He followed me, curious. I didn't know you cooked. I'm Italian-American and I run a small business, I called over my shoulder. If I didn't know how to stretch ingredients into a meal, I would have starved years ago. 20 minutes later, the sterile scent of the penthouse was replaced by the warm, pungent aroma of garlic, olive oil, and crushed tomatoes. I had found a bag of arborio rice in the back of the pantry, probably part of a gift basket he had never opened, and some frozen stock. Nicholas sat at the island, a glass of red wine in his hand, watching me stir the risotto. He wasn't looking at his phone for once. He was watching my hands. You handle that knife like a weapon, he commented as I chopped parsley. A knife is a tool, I said, sweeping the herbs into the pan. It only becomes a weapon if you use it wrong, or if you're desperate. Desperate. He repeated the word, tasting it. Is that how you feel? Desperate. I stopped stirring for a moment, looking down at the bubbling rice. I feel suspended, like I'm holding my breath waiting for the other shoe to drop. You saved my life, Nicholas, and I'm grateful. But I don't know what comes next. I don't know if I have a life to go back to. You do, he said firmly. I promised you. I don't break promises. You can't control everything. I can control this. His phone buzzed on the counter, a harsh vibration against the marble. The softness that had entered the room evaporated instantly. Nicholas looked at the screen, and his face hardened into a mask of stone. He picked it up. Rinaldi. I went back to stirring, trying to give him privacy, but the kitchen was open concept, and his voice carried. I don't care what the dean says. Nicholas snapped into the phone. If she leaves the campus perimeter, I want to know. If she goes to the library at night, someone walks with her. Yes. Inside the building. He paused, listening, his knuckles white around the glass of wine. No, he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You tell him that if he denies my security detail access to the dorms, I will buy the university board and fire him by morning. She is not to be left alone. Not for a second. Do you understand? Fix it. He hung up and slammed the phone face down on the counter. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I poured the risotto onto 2 plates, moving slowly. Trouble? He ran a hand through his dark hair, messing up the perfect style. He looked human then. Not a mob boss, but a brother. My sister, he said, the admission surprising me. Sophia. She's 19, studying architecture at Columbia. For a heartbeat, the words hung there between us like something fragile and impossibly normal. A reminder that under all the concrete and leverage and violence, there were people he loved who had never chosen this life, and who could still be broken by it. Does she know? I asked, gesturing vaguely at the luxury prison around us. She knows who we are, Nicholas said, picking up his fork but not eating. She knows the family history, but I've kept her out of it. She's the clean one, the legitimate one. She's never seen a transaction, never sat at a table with the people I deal with. I built a wall around her so high, I thought nothing could climb it. But the Yamaguchi-gumi can climb, I guessed softly. Nicholas looked up at me, his eyes dark with a mixture of fear and fury that I recognized from the flower shop. They haven't made a move on her yet, but they are sniffing around. I have 4 men on her, rotating shifts. She thinks I'm being paranoid. She called me yesterday screaming that I'm suffocating her, that she can't even get coffee without a shadow. She's 19, I said, sliding his plate closer to him. She wants to be normal. She doesn't understand the cost of the wall you built. I don't need her to understand it, Nicholas said, stabbing a mushroom with his fork. I just need her to survive it. If they touch her, if they even look at her. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The violence was implied in the silence. She's your leverage, I realized. That's why you're so on edge. You're not just protecting your territory. You're protecting her. Everyone has a weakness, Emily. In this world, family is a target painted on your back. He took a bite of the risotto, chewing slowly. He blinked, surprised. This is good. It's better than takeout, I said, sitting across from him. Eat. You can't protect anyone if you pass out from hypoglycemia. We ate in silence for a few minutes. It was a companionable silence, the tension of the phone call dissipating slightly under the influence of warm food and wine. So, I said, wiping my mouth, if the Yamaguchi want the block, and they are threatening me and sniffing around your sister, what is the endgame? They can't just kill everyone in Chicago. That draws too much heat, even for the Yakuza. They don't want to kill everyone, Nicholas explained, pouring more wine. They want the supply route. That block where your shop sits? It has direct access to the old underground freight tunnels that lead to the rail yard. It's perfect for moving product without hitting the highway way stations. Product, I said. Drugs? Among other things. They need a front to launder the money. A high-volume business with legitimate shipping contracts. He stood up, restless again, and walked over to the dining table where he had left a stack of files earlier in the day. He opened one, staring at a map of the city. I followed him. My curiosity was piqued. And frankly, if my life was on the line, I wanted to know the details. I stood beside him, looking down at the papers scattered across the mahogany surface. There were maps, surveillance photos of men I didn't recognize, and financial spreadsheets. One document caught my eye. It was a corporate acquisition summary, stamped with a logo I knew intimately. A green dragon curled around a golden coin. "Green Dragon Holdings," I said, pointing at the paper. "Why do you have a file on them?" Nicholas didn't look up from the map. "That's the shell company the Yamaguchi are using to buy up the real estate. They're registered in the Caymans." "Why?" "It's not just real estate," I said, my mind racing, connecting the dots that had been floating in my head for weeks. "Nicholas, look at this." I reached past him, my arm brushing against his chest. I felt his muscles tense at the contact, but he didn't pull away. I tapped the paper. "Green Dragon didn't just buy the buildings," I said, my voice gaining confidence. "They bought Verda Vita. That's the largest fertilizer and agricultural chemical supplier in the Midwest." Nicholas looked at me then, his brow furrowed. "Fertilizer? Emily, I'm tracking money laundering, not gardening supplies." "Listen to me," I insisted. 3 weeks ago, I got a notice that my nitrogen prices were tripling. I thought it was just corporate greed, but then I tried to switch suppliers. I called 3 different companies. They were all out of stock or had raised their prices to match Verda Vita exactly. Green Dragon has monopolized the agricultural chemical supply for the entire state. Nicholas turned fully toward me, his eyes narrowing. "Go on." "Why would a Yakuza front company care about monopolizing fertilizer?" I asked, the pieces clicking together. "Unless they aren't selling it. They're hoarding it. Or they're using the distribution network." I grabbed a pen from the table and flipped the paper over, sketching a rough diagram. "Verda Vita has pre-approved customs clearance for hazardous materials because of the ammonium nitrate," I explained, drawing lines. "Their trucks don't get searched at the state lines because they are certified carriers of agricultural chemicals. If you wanted to move tons of illicit product, meth precursors, synthetic opioids, and hide it in plain sight, you wouldn't use a random truck. You would use a fertilizer tanker. It smells terrible, it's dangerous to open, and nobody wants to inspect it." Nicholas stared at my drawing. He was silent for a long time. Then, he picked up the file on Green Dragon and flipped through it with a new intensity. "Ammonium nitrate," he muttered. "They aren't just moving drugs. They're moving bomb-making materials, and they're doing it under the guise of farming supplies." He looked up at me, and the expression on his face made my breath hitch. It wasn't just attraction anymore. It was admiration. Respect. I wasn't just the florist he wanted to sleep with. I was the partner who had just cracked the code he had been staring at for a month. "I've been looking for their wash," Nicholas said, his voice low. "I've been looking for the bank accounts where they clean the cash, but I was looking at casinos and construction. I missed the supply chain." "You don't know the floral industry," I said, feeling a flush of pride. "But I do. I know when the supply chain smells wrong. And Green Dragon smells like rot. This changes everything," Nicholas said. He began pacing, his energy renewed, sharp and dangerous. "If they are using Verda Vita trucks, they have a hub, a central warehouse where they mix the product. It has to be outside the city limits, somewhere with heavy industrial zoning. I can tell you where it is," I said. He stopped pacing and looked at me. "How?" "Because before I stopped ordering from them, they sent me a new return address for the empty canisters," I said. "It was weird because usually we ship them back to the factory in Ohio. But the new address was here, in Illinois, a place called Aurora Distribution. I remember it because I thought it was odd they moved their logistics hub so close to the city." Nicholas grabbed his phone, but this time he didn't bark orders. He looked at me while he dialed. "Give me the address," he said. "I have it on my laptop," I said. "In the invoice email." I ran to the couch, woke up my computer, and pulled up the email from Green Dragon. Nicholas was already on the line with his head of security. "Get the team ready," Nicholas said into the phone, his eyes fixed on me as I read the address out loud. "No, we're not waiting for intel. I have the intel. We're going on the offensive." He hung up and walked over to me. He took the laptop from my hands and set it on the coffee table. Then he took my face in his hands. His palms were warm, rough, and electric. "You just saved us months of surveillance," he said, his voice raspy. "You just gave me the throat of the enemy. I just want them to stop raising my prices," I joked weakly, my heart hammering against my ribs. Nicholas didn't laugh. He leaned down, his forehead resting against mine. "You are not just a florist, Emily Mitchell. You are dangerous. Is that a compliment? In my world, it's the highest one there is." He pulled back, his eyes searching mine. The air between us was charged with static. We were standing in the middle of a war room, surrounded by maps of our enemies, and all I could think about was how much I wanted him to kiss me. "I have to go," he said, stepping back, the regret evident in his voice. "I have to hit that warehouse before they move the inventory. If we can prove they are trafficking narcotics in those trucks, I can bring the feds down on them. I can burn Green Dragon to the ground legally." "You're leaving?" Panic flared in my chest. "Now, I have to lead this, Emily. If I send my men alone, it looks weak. I need to be the one to light the match." He walked to a hidden panel in the wall, opening it to reveal a safe. He pulled out a heavier tactical vest and a different gun. I watched him arm himself. It was a terrifying transformation. The businessman was gone completely, replaced by the predator. "Stay here," he ordered, checking the magazine of his weapon. "The lockdown is active. Nobody gets in unless they have my biometrics. Do not open the door for anyone, not even room service." "Nicholas," I said. He paused at the door. "Be careful," I said. "Please." He looked at me one last time, his hand on the keypad. "I'll be back. Keep the plants alive for me." Then he was gone, and the heavy steel locks of the penthouse slammed home, sealing me in. I stood there in the silence, the smell of risotto still lingering in the air. I looked at the files on the table, the map of the city, and the Green Dragon logo. I felt a strange sense of clarity. I wasn't just a victim hiding in a tower anymore. I had thrown a stone back. I had helped him. I walked back to the winter garden. The ficus tree was still there, its leaves shiny and clean. "You and me, buddy," I whispered to the tree. "We're just going to wait here and hope the storm doesn't break the glass." But as I looked out at the city lights, knowing that Nicholas was out there hunting the monsters that wanted me dead, I realized something else. I didn't just want to survive the storm. I wanted to be part of it. I wanted to know that the man coming home to me wasn't just a protector, but a partner. And tonight, for the first time, I felt like one. I went back to the kitchen to clean up the dishes, but my mind was already racing. If the warehouse in Aurora was the hub, then the Yakuza would be guarding it with everything they had. Nicholas was walking into a trap or a fortress. I hoped the information I gave him was enough. I hoped the Aurora distribution center wasn't just another empty shell. I checked my laptop again, looking at the Green Dragon email chain. There was a tracking number for my last shipment. I clicked it. Status: delivered. Signed by K. Yamaguchi. I froze. They weren't just using shell companies. The clan leadership was signing for the packages personally. That meant the warehouse wasn't just a hub. It was their headquarters. I grabbed my phone to call Nicholas. But then I remembered. He had gone dark. "Burn the protocol," he had said. He wouldn't answer. I sat down on the floor, the phone in my hand, staring at the name on the screen. Yamaguchi. Nicholas wasn't just going to burn a warehouse. He was walking straight into the lion's den. And I was the one who had given him the address. "Come back," I whispered to the empty room. "Just come back." The penthouse felt colder than ever. I wrapped my arms around myself, waiting for the dawn, or the phone call that would tell me if I was a widow before I had even been a wife. Minutes turned into hours. I couldn't sit still. I paced the length of the living room, from the window to the kitchen and back again. The silence was agonizing. I needed to do something. I needed to be useful. I went back to the table with the files. I started organizing them, not just shuffling papers, but reading them properly. If I was going to be part of this world, I needed to understand the language. I read about the zoning laws, the import taxes, the rival families. I found a file labeled Personnel. I opened it. It was a list of Nicholas's men. their backgrounds, their specialties. And then, a smaller file clipped to the back. Subject, Mafia Rinaldi. Status, surveillance active. Threat level, moderate. I read the notes. Photos of a pretty girl with dark curly hair laughing with friends at a coffee shop. Photos of her walking into a library. And in the background of one of the photos, blurred but recognizable, a white van with a green dragon logo. My blood ran cold. The photo was dated 2 days ago. They weren't just sniffing around Sophia. They were already there. The fertilizer trucks, the delivery vans. They were using the green dragon fleet to shadow her, blending in with city traffic. Nicholas was attacking the warehouse in Aurora. But the real threat might not be at the warehouse. It might be parked outside a dorm room in New York. I looked at the time. It was 2:00 a.m. I couldn't call Nicholas. But I could call the number listed in the file under Sophia's detail, lead. I hesitated. I was a guest. An outsider. I had no authority to give orders to made men. But I looked at the photo of the girl who looked so much like Nicholas, unaware of the dragon breathing down her neck. I dialed the number. "This line is secure," a gruff voice answered. "Identify. This is Emily Mitchell," I said, my voice trembling but clear. I am with Nicholas Rinaldi. He is currently unreachable." "We know who you are, Ms. Mitchell," the voice said, sounding wary. "What is the emergency?" "The threat to Sophia," I said. "Check the perimeter for commercial delivery vans, specifically Green Dragon or Verdi Vita branding. They aren't just trucks, they are surveillance units." There was a pause. "We have a florist van parked down the street. It's been there since shift change." "Check it," I ordered, channeling every ounce of Nicholas's authority I could mimic. "It's not a florist. It's them." "Hold on." I heard muffled movement, the sound of a car door opening, then shouting. A gunshot. Then silence. "Ms. Mitchell?" The voice was breathless now. "We just engaged 2 hostiles in a surveillance van. They were armed. They had eyes on the target's window. We neutralized them." I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. "Is she safe?" I asked. "She's secure. We're moving her to the safe house now." "You have good eyes, Ms. Mitchell. We missed the van because it had a parking permit. They own the logistics companies," I said, feeling a wave of exhaustion hit me. "They own everything. We'll inform the boss when he comes back on comms. Good work." The line clicked dead. I sank onto the couch, shaking. I had just intercepted a hit. I had just given an order to a hitman. I looked at my hands. They were the hands of a florist. But tonight, they had done something else. They had protected the family. I lay down on the sofa, pulling a cashmere throw over me. I watched the door, waiting for Nicholas. I had news for him, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of his reaction. I was ready to stand next to him. The city lights twinkled below, indifferent to the wars being fought in the shadows. But up here, in the glass fortress, the winter garden was breathing a little easier. And so was I. I closed my eyes, the image of the white chrysanthemum finally fading, replaced by the image of Nicholas's eyes when he looked at me across the kitchen island. "Come home," I whispered again. And this time, I believed he would. The silence of the penthouse was broken by the sound of the biometric locks disengaging. It was 4 a.m. I hadn't slept. I was sitting on the same sofa where I had orchestrated a hit on a surveillance van 3 hours ago, clutching a cold cup of tea that I hadn't taken a sip of. The heavy steel door slid open, and Nicholas walked in. He didn't look like the polished CEO who bought flowers on Tuesdays. He looked like a man who had just walked through hell and put out the fire with his bare hands. His tactical vest was gone, but his black shirt was streaked with soot and something darker that might have been dried blood. He smelled of smoke, cordite, and the metallic tang of violence. He stopped when he saw me. For a second, his guard didn't drop. He scanned the room, his body tense, eyes checking the corners before they finally landed on my face. "You're awake," he said, his voice rough, like he had been shouting over gunfire. "I couldn't sleep," I replied, standing up. My legs felt shaky, but I locked my knees. I heard from the detail. "Sophia is safe," Nicholas exhaled. a long, shuddering breath that seemed to deflate his aggressive posture. He walked toward me, not stopping until he was close enough that I could feel the heat radiating off him. He didn't touch me. He just looked at me as if he was trying to solve a complex equation. "My head of security told me," Nicholas said quietly. "He said you identified a threat they missed. He said you gave the order to engage. I didn't know if I had the right," I whispered. "But I saw the van in the photo. It was the same fleet that delivers the fertilizer. I couldn't let them stay there." "You saved her," Nicholas said. The intensity in his eyes was overwhelming. "You aren't even part of this family. And you saved my sister while I was busy burning down a warehouse." "Is it done?" I asked. "The distribution center?" "Gone," he confirmed grimly. "We found the logs. You were right about everything, Emily. The fertilizer trucks, the hidden compartments, the routes. We seized the hard drives before we torched the inventory. The Yamaguchi supply chain in the Midwest is dead." He finally reached out, his hand cupping my cheek. His thumb was stained with soot, leaving a smudge on my skin. But I didn't pull away. I leaned into it. "Go shower," I said softly. "You smell like a war." "We're not done yet," he said, dropping his hand. "We won the battle tonight, but we have to win the war tomorrow." "What happens tomorrow?" "The mayor's winter gala," Nicholas said. "It's the biggest social event of the season. Every power player in Chicago will be there. The politicians, the judges, and the Yamaguchi leadership." "You're going?" I asked, incredulous. "After tonight? Especially after tonight," he replied, his eyes hardening. "If I don't show up, they'll think I'm wounded. They'll think I'm hiding. I need to walk into that ballroom and look them in the eye while their warehouse is still smoking. I need to show them that I am untouchable." He paused, looking me up and down. "And you're coming with me?" I blinked. "Me? Nicholas, I'm a florist. I don't belong at a gala with mafia dons and senators. Besides, they want to kill me. They want to kill a victim," he corrected. "They won't touch the woman standing on my arm. Taking you is a statement. It tells them that you are under my personal protection. It tells them that if they want you, they have to go through me in front of 500 witnesses." "I don't have a dress," I said, a practical objection rising to the surface of my panic. "I know," Nicholas said. "That's why I had one sent over. It's in the guest room." He walked past me toward his suite, stopping at the door. "Get some sleep, Emily. Tomorrow night, we put on a show." The dress was a weapon. There was no other way to describe it. I had expected something understated. Black, maybe, or a soft pastel to make me look innocent. But when I unzipped the garment bag the next evening, the fabric that spilled out was the color of fresh arterial blood. It was a deep, rich crimson silk that felt like water against my fingers. It was backless, with a neckline that plunged dangerously low, and a slit that went up to my thigh. It wasn't a dress for a florist. It was a dress for a queen who was ready to order an execution. I stared at myself in the floor-length mirror of the guest suite. The makeup artist Nicholas had hired, a woman who worked in silence and didn't ask why the windows were bulletproof, had painted my lips a matching dark red. My blonde hair was swept up in an intricate twist, exposing the curve of my neck. I didn't recognize the woman in the mirror. She looked cold. She looked expensive. She looked like she belonged to Nicholas Rinaldi. A knock on the door made me turn. "Come in," I said. Nicholas entered. He stopped dead in his tracks. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him with the same lethal precision as his tactical gear. The black tie was perfectly knotted, the white shirt stark against his tan skin. He looked devastatingly handsome, but his eyes were what held me. They darkened as they swept over me, lingering on the exposed skin of my back, then the slit in the skirt. "Red," I said, gesturing to the silk. "It's a bold choice. I thought you'd want me to blend in." "I don't want you to blend in," Nicholas said, his voice dropping to a rough baritone. He walked toward me, the sound of his dress shoes swallowed by the carpet. "You are not invisible, Emily. Not anymore. I want every man in that room to see you. I want the Yamaguchi to see you. Red is a warning." "A warning?" He stopped inches from me, his scent. Sandalwood and something uniquely masculine, filling my senses. It's the color of danger. It tells them that you are hazardous material. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a velvet box. Inside was a diamond tennis bracelet. He took my wrist, the same wrist I had bruised on the van door days ago, and fastened the diamonds over the faint yellow mark. It fits, he murmured. It's too much, I whispered. The dress, the jewelry. Nicholas, I'm just playing a part. He looked up, meeting my gaze in the mirror. Are you? My heart hammered against my ribs. Was I? 2 days ago, I was worried about nitrogen prices. Last night, I ordered a hit. Tonight, I was wearing $10,000 of silk to taunt a crime syndicate. I don't know who I am anymore, I admitted. You're the woman who saved my sister, he said firmly. You're the woman who didn't run. That's who you are. Now, are you ready to walk into the fire? I took a deep breath, smoothing the silk over my hips. As long as you're holding the match. The grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel was a sea of crystals, champagne, and forced smiles. The air smelled of expensive perfume and hypocrisy. As we walked through the main doors, the chatter didn't stop, but it shifted. Heads turned, eyes narrowed. I felt the weight of hundreds of gazes hitting us. Nicholas didn't flinch. He placed his hand on the small of my back, skin on skin, his fingers warm and possessing, and guided me into the room. He walked with a predator's grace, nodding at a senator, acknowledging a judge but stopping for no one. Don't look down, he whispered in my ear. Look them in the eye. If they stare, stare back until they look away. I did as he said. I locked eyes with a woman in emerald green who was whispering behind her hand. She blinked and turned away first. A surge of adrenaline spiked in my blood. It worked. The dress, the diamonds, the man beside me. It was armor. Rinaldi, a voice boomed. A heavy-set man with a flushed face and a tuxedo that was straining at the buttons approached us. It was Councilman Miller. I heard about the disturbance in Aurora last night, Miller said, his eyes darting nervously between Nicholas and me. A warehouse fire. Terrible business. Industrial accidents happen when safety protocols are ignored, Nicholas said smoothly, his tone bored. It's a reminder to keep one's house in order. Don't you agree, Councilman? Miller paled. Yes, of course. And who is this charming companion? This is Emily, Nicholas said. He didn't introduce me as his florist. He didn't introduce me as his girlfriend. He just said my name as if it were a title. She's with me. A pleasure, Miller stammered. Councilman, I nodded, keeping my face impassive. We moved on. We danced around the room, engaging in small talk that was laced with subtext. I realized quickly that half the people here knew about the war between Rinaldi and Yamaguchi, and they were watching to see who would bleed first. Then, I saw them. Standing near the bar, a group of 4 men. They weren't drinking. They were watching. In the center was an older Japanese man with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Next to him was a younger man, sharp features, cruel mouth. That's Kenta Yamaguchi, Nicholas murmured, feeling my body tense. The son, the one who signed for the packages. He's looking at us, I whispered. Let him look. Kenta said something to the older man, then separated from the group. He began walking toward us. The crowd seemed to part instinctively, creating a corridor of tension. Nicholas's hand tightened on my waist, not painfully, but reassuringly. Stay calm. Do not speak unless he addresses you directly. Kenta stopped 2 feet away. He was handsome in a terrifying way, like a polished blade. He held a glass of red wine in his hand. Mr. Rinaldi, Kenta said. His English was perfect, accented with Ivy League education. We were surprised to see you tonight. We heard you had a busy evening. I always make time for charity, Nicholas replied, his voice ice cold. Unlike some, I prefer to keep my business hours strictly professional. Kenta smirked. Then his eyes slid to me. He raked his gaze over the red dress, lingering on the slit, then the neckline. It wasn't a look of desire. It was a look of assessment, like he was checking the price tag on cattle. And this must be the florist, Kenta said. A bold color choice. Red usually signifies a target, doesn't it? It signifies passion, I said, my voice steady despite the screaming in my head. Something you might not know much about, Mr. Yamaguchi. I hear your business is strictly wholesale. Nicholas's grip on my waist flexed. I had surprised him. Kenta's smile faltered. Clever. But flowers are fragile things, Miss Mitchell. They wilt so easily when the heat rises. He took a step closer, invading my personal space. He raised his glass as if to toast, but then, with a calculated clumsiness, his wrist jerked. It happened in slow motion. The red wine sloshed out of the wide-rimmed glass, arching toward my silk dress. But Nicholas was faster. Before the liquid could touch me, Nicholas had spun me around, pulling me hard against his chest, shielding me with his own body. The wine splashed across the back of his tuxedo jacket, soaking the expensive wool. The ballroom went silent. The music seemed to stop. Every eye was on us. Nicholas didn't look at his ruined jacket. He didn't look at the crowd. He slowly turned back to Kenta, keeping one arm wrapped securely around me. Kenta feigned shock. Oh, my apologies. I must have slipped. Nicholas stepped forward. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. He didn't shout. He didn't throw a punch. He leaned in close to Kenta, his face inches from the other man's, his voice a low, terrifying whisper that carried more weight than a scream. That was a mistake, Nicholas said. It was an accident, Kenta replied, though his arrogance was wavering. You missed her, Nicholas said, his eyes dark voids. But I won't. Listen to me closely, little dragon. For every drop of wine that was meant for her dress, I will take a gallon of blood from your clan. I burned your warehouse yesterday. Touch her again, and I will burn your entire lineage. He reached into his breast pocket, pulled out a white silk handkerchief, and dropped it into Kenta's half-empty wine glass. The wine soaked into the white silk, red on white. Keep it, Nicholas said. It's the only surrender flag you're going to get. He turned his back on them. We're leaving. He guided me through the stunned crowd. Nobody spoke to us. They parted like the Red Sea. I could feel the tremors in Nicholas's arm, the sheer force of the rage he was suppressing. We burst out into the cold night air, the valet already scrambling to bring the armored SUV. Nicholas didn't wait. He opened the back door himself and practically lifted me inside. He climbed in after me, slamming the door shut. The privacy partition was already up. We were alone in the dark leather cocoon. Are you okay? He demanded, his hands immediately on me, checking my arms, my face, as if the wine had been acid. Did any of it touch you? I'm fine, I said, breathless. You took it all. Your jacket. Burn the jacket, he growled, shrugging it off and throwing it on the floor of the car. He was breathing hard, the adrenaline of the confrontation crashing through him. He tried to mark you. In public. The arrogance. Nicholas, I said, reaching out to touch his chest. His white shirt was stark in the gloom. You stopped him. You terrified him. I saw his face. He was scared. He looked at me, his eyes wild. I wanted to kill him. Right there on the marble floor, when I saw that wine flying toward you. All I could see was the chrysanthemum. The threat. But you didn't, I said, moving closer to him on the seat. The red silk rustled. You controlled it. You protected me. I will always protect you, he swore. I told you. You are mine to guard. Is that all I am? I asked, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Something to guard? A flower in a greenhouse? The question hung in the air. The car sped through the city, the streetlights flashing rhythmically across his face. Nicholas looked at me, really looked at me, in the red dress. He looked at the diamonds on my wrist, the pulse fluttering in my throat. No, he rasped. You know that's not all you are. Show me, I challenged him. Show me I'm not just a job. He didn't hesitate. He reached out, his hand tangling in the hair at the nape of my neck, and pulled me to him. His mouth crashed onto mine. It wasn't gentle. It wasn't a polite first kiss. It was desperate, possessive, and fueled by days of fear and violence. It tasted of champagne and danger. I gasped, opening for him, and he deepened the kiss with a groan that vibrated against my lips. My hands found the front of his shirt, bunching the fabric, pulling him closer. I needed this. I needed to feel the life in him. The fire that proved we were both still breathing after the threats and the guns. His hands roamed over the silk of my dress, tracing the curve of my spine where the fabric ended. His touch was scorching. "Emily," he breathed against my mouth, breaking the kiss for a fraction of a second. "I've wanted to do this since the moment you scolded me about the dust on the ficus tree. Shut up and kiss me again," I whispered. He obeyed. He kissed me until my head spun, until the memory of the Yakuza and the warehouse faded, leaving only the sensation of his hands, his mouth, and the overwhelming certainty that I had crossed a line I could never step back from. I wasn't the florist anymore. And he wasn't just the customer. We were partners in the wreckage, bound by a red dress and a white handkerchief soaking in wine. The car slowed as we approached the garage, but neither of us moved away. Nicholas rested his forehead against mine, his breathing ragged. "They will come for us now," he said, his voice low and serious. "Kenta won't let that insult stand. The war has officially started." I ran my thumb over his lower lip, swollen from our kiss. "Let them come. We burned their warehouse. We humiliated them at the ball. We're winning." Nicholas let out a dark, rough chuckle. I like the sound of that. "Get used to it," I said. "I'm not going back to the daisies, Nicholas. I think I prefer the thorns." He kissed my palm, his eyes promising a storm that would shake the city to its foundations. "Good," he said, "because from now on, you're not leaving my side." The car stopped. The doors unlocked. But as we walked to the elevator, hand in hand, I knew the safest place in Chicago wasn't the penthouse. It was standing right next to the monster who had just declared war for me. And God help anyone who tried to take his flower. The elevator doors slid open, delivering us back into the sanctuary of the penthouse. But the air inside felt wrong. It wasn't the temperature, not yet, but the weight of the atmosphere. The silence I had grown used to over the last few days had changed. It wasn't the peaceful silence of insulation. It was the dead, heavy silence of a machine that had stopped breathing. Nicholas stepped out first, his hand still gripping mine. He was still vibrating with the energy of the confrontation at the ballroom, his eyes scanning the living room as if he expected Kenta Yamaguchi to be sitting on his Italian leather sofa. "Something's off," Nicholas muttered, releasing my hand to reach for the light panel on the wall. He tapped the sensor. Nothing happened. "Power surge?" I asked, stepping into the room. The red silk of my dress rustled loudly in the quiet. Or did the storm knock out a transformer? "This building has 3 backup generators," Nicholas said, his voice tight. "The grid could go down for the entire eastern seaboard, and my lights should still work." He tapped the panel again. "System status," he commanded. The ambient voice of the penthouse AI, usually a smooth, feminine alto, remained silent. Then, a sound cut through the room. A mechanical whirring, grinding, and high-pitched. It was coming from the wall of floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. "Get back," Nicholas ordered, pushing me behind him. We watched in horror as the heavy, bulletproof glass panels began to slide open. Not just one, but all of them. The automated motors groaned against the locks, forcing them disengaged. The wind didn't wait for an invitation. It slammed into the apartment with the force of a physical blow. Chicago in January is not merely cold, it is a weapon. The temperature outside was 5 degrees below zero, with a wind chill that could freeze skin in minutes. The gale roared into the living room, scattering papers from the desk, toppling a vase, and instantly sucking the heat out of the space. "The system!" Nicholas shouted over the wind, grabbing his phone. "They've hacked the automation." He was tapping furiously on his screen, but I could see the red "access denied" flashing even from where I stood. "They're locking us out," he yelled. "They've overridden the climate control and the security seals." The cold was instantaneous. It bit through the thin silk of my dress like needles. I wrapped my arms around myself, shivering violently. "Can't you close them manually?" "The manual overrides are in the server room," Nicholas shouted, moving toward the hallway. "Stay here. Huddle near the fireplace." "The fireplace is gas," I yelled back, my teeth already chattering. "If they control the system, they cut the gas too." He cursed, a harsh sound lost in the howling wind, and ran toward the back of the apartment. I stood there, paralyzed for a second. The wind was whipping my hair across my face, stinging my eyes. Snowflakes were beginning to swirl into the living room, settling on the expensive rugs. It was surreal. One minute we were the kings of the city, the next we were standing in a glorified icebox. Then I heard a sound that terrified me more than the wind. A deep, resonant groaning coming from the right, from the winter garden. I ran toward the glass atrium. The door to the garden was propped open by the wind pressure. Inside, the tropical plants were thrashing in the draft. But the sound wasn't the wind. It was the pipes. The complex, high-pressure irrigation system that kept the humidity at 90% for the ficus and ferns. I saw the copper pipes along the ceiling vibrating. "Water expands when it freezes," I whispered to myself. If those pipes froze, they wouldn't just crack. They were pressurized. They would explode. And the main water line for the penthouse ran directly through the floor of the atrium, right above the server room where Nicholas was heading. If that line burst, thousands of gallons of water would flood the server room. It would destroy the manual overrides. It would destroy the security mainframe. We wouldn't just be cold. We would be defenseless, locked in a dead building with no cameras and no comms. I didn't think. I didn't wait for Nicholas. I reacted with the instinct of a florist who had spent 10 years battling Illinois winters to save her livelihood. I ran into the atrium. The temperature in there was plummeting, the shock to the tropical plants immediate. I ignored them. I scanned the wall for the main intake valve. It was up high, near the ceiling, hidden behind a trellis of jasmine. I grabbed the heavy stepladder Nicholas had left in the corner from days ago. I dragged it over, my heels slipping on the wet tiles. Condensation was already turning to ice. I climbed the ladder, the wind buffeting the glass walls around me. My hands were numb. I reached for the red wheel of the emergency shutoff valve. It wouldn't budge. It was rusted tight, or maybe the cold had already seized the metal. I gripped it with both hands, gritting my teeth, putting every ounce of strength I had into turning it. "Come on!" I screamed at the metal. "Move!" "Emily!" I looked down. Nicholas was standing in the doorway of the atrium, looking up at me with wide eyes. "What are you doing? Get down! You'll freeze!" "The pipes!" I screamed back, pointing at the vibrating copper. "The water line runs over the server room. If these burst, you lose the mainframe. We have to drain the system." He looked at the pipes, then at me. He didn't argue. He didn't tell me to be safe. He realized instantly that I was right. He sprinted to the ladder. "I'll turn it. You guide the pressure release." He climbed up behind me. There wasn't room for 2 people on the ladder, so he stood on the rung below me, his chest pressed against my back. His body heat was a sudden, shocking relief against my frozen skin. He reached around me, his large hands covering mine on the red wheel. "On 3, he roared over the wind. 1, 2, 3. We pulled together. I felt the muscles in his arms bunch and harden against me. The metal groaned, screeched, and then, with a violent jerk, gave way. The wheel spun. "Keep turning," I yelled. "All the way to the right." Nicholas cranked the wheel until it locked shut. The water flow was cut, but the pressure was still in the pipes. "The release valve," I shouted, pointing to a smaller lever near the floor, behind the large fern pot. "We have to dump the remaining water, or it will still burst." Nicholas jumped down from the ladder, splashing into a puddle that was already forming a skin of ice. He scrambled behind the fern. "It's stuck," he yelled. "Kick it," I instructed. "It's a ball valve. Just kick the lever flat." He drew back his leg and delivered a kick that would have broken a door down. His dress shoe connected with the lever. Pshhh! A jet of water sprayed out, soaking Nicholas's tuxedo pants instantly, but the groaning in the ceiling stopped. The vibration ceased. The system was drained. Nicholas stood up, water dripping from his legs. He looked at me, shivering on the ladder. He didn't smile. He reached up and pulled me down into his arms. "We need to get inside," he said, his teeth chattering. "Now!" He practically carried me back into the living room. The windows were still wide open, snow piling up on the furniture. The temperature was now critical. I could feel my brain slowing down, my movements becoming clumsy. Hypothermia was setting in fast. "Server room," Nicholas commanded. "It's interior, no windows. The servers generate heat. It's the only warm place left." We ran down the hallway. It was pitch black, guided only by the emergency lights on his phone. He slammed his shoulder against the heavy steel door of the server room. It opened. We stumbled inside. The difference was immediate. It wasn't hot, but the hum of the rack-mounted servers created a pocket of dry, tepid air. It was maybe 50 degrees in there, compared to the sub-zero nightmare outside. Nicholas slammed the door shut and engaged the manual deadbolt. "Safe," he breathed, sliding down the wall until he hit the floor. I sank down next to him. The adrenaline crash was hitting me hard. My body started to shake uncontrollably. Violent tremors racked my frame. We stopped the water. I stuttered, my teeth clicking together so hard I thought they would crack. "You stopped it," Nicholas said. He reached out and touched my arm. His hand was freezing. "You saved the system. If that water had hit the racks," he gestured to the blinking lights of the servers around us, "we would be blind." He looked at me, really looked at me. My red dress was damp from the mist in the atrium. My lips were blue. "You're freezing," he said. The concern in his voice cut through his own exhaustion. "So, are you?" I managed to say. "Your pee pants are wet." "Hypothermia," Nicholas stated, his voice clinical but urgent. "We need to get dry, and we need body heat."
"It's the only way to raise our core temperature fast enough." He didn't make it a question. He didn't make it sexual. It was a tactical necessity. "Take the dress off," he said. "It's damp silk. It's pulling heat away from you." Under normal circumstances, standing in a server room asking a man to strip would have been insane, but I couldn't feel my toes. My vision was tunneling. I reached for the zipper on the side of the dress, but my fingers were useless claws. I couldn't grip the tiny metal tab. "I can't," I whispered, panic rising. "My hands." Nicholas moved closer. "Let me." His hands were shaking too, but he had the discipline to force them steady. He found the zipper. He pulled it down. The red silk pooled at my feet. I stepped out of it, wearing only the thin lace undergarments I had put on hours ago. The air in the room hit my skin, and I gasped. Nicholas was already removing his soaking wet jacket and shirt. He kicked off his wet shoes and peeled off the sodden trousers. He was left in his boxer briefs. He grabbed a drop cloth that was sitting on a shelf, a canvas sheet used for maintenance. It wasn't a blanket, but it was dry. He spread it on the floor between the server racks. "Come here," he ordered. We lay down on the canvas. Nicholas pulled me against him. He wrapped his arms around me, pulling my back against his chest, interlacing our legs. The shock of his skin against mine was intense. He was cold, like marble, but deep down, there was a furnace burning. "Stay still," he whispered against my ear. "Let the heat transfer." I buried my face in his arm. I closed my eyes and focused on breathing. In, out, in, out. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, the shivering began to subside. I could feel the warmth seeping from him into me, and from me into him. It was a primitive, biological magic. "They tried to freeze us out," Nicholas murmured, his voice rumbling in his chest against my back. "They couldn't get past the bulletproof glass, so they used the smart home hub. Clever. Kenta is more tech-savvy than his father. You need to fix the firewall," I mumbled, the drowsiness of warming up starting to take over. "I will," he promised, "once I can feel my fingers again." He tightened his grip on me. His hand rested flat on my stomach, his thumb tracing the line of my hip bone. "You were incredible out there," he said softly. "Most people would have run for the door. You ran toward the danger." "I know pipes," I whispered. "I know what ice does to things that are trying to grow." "You saved us," he repeated. "Emily,
Do you understand? You didn't just save the computer, you saved our position. If this system went down, the perimeter sensors would fail. They could have walked right in the front door. I turned in his arms, shifting so I was facing him. The space between the server racks was narrow, forcing us to be completely intertwined. In the blinking blue LEDs of the server lights, his face looked sharp, stripped of all the social masks he wore. "We're a good team," I said. He looked at my lips, then my eyes. "We are." He reached up and brushed a strand of hair away from my face. His touch was no longer cold. It was warm. "I'm sorry," he said. "For what?" "For the blizzard? For bringing this to your door? For the cold? For the fear?" "I'm not afraid," I lied. Well, maybe it wasn't a lie anymore. "I was afraid in the shop when you smashed the table. I was afraid when the courier brought the flour. But right now, I'm just angry." Nicholas's eyes flared with approval. "Good. Hold on to that. Anger keeps you warm. What are we going to do, Nicholas, when the sun comes up?" "First, I reboot the system manually from this terminal." He gestured to the console behind him. "I lock them out. Then I turn the heat back on. Then we finish it." He said, darker than the shadows in the room. "They escalated. They attacked my home. They attacked you. There are no more rules." He pulled me closer, burying his face in the crook of my neck. I could feel his heartbeat against my chest, steady, powerful, reassuring. "But for now," he whispered, "we just survived the night." I rested my head on his shoulder. The hum of the servers was a white noise lullaby. The canvas was rough against my skin, and the floor was hard. But I had never felt safer. We lay there for hours, suspended in time. The storm raged outside the open windows of the living room, burying the penthouse in snow, freezing the furniture, destroying the art. But in this tiny steel box, we were alive. At some point, the shivering stopped completely. The heat between us became stifling, heavy with something else. "Emily," Nicholas whispered. "Yeah? I can't stop thinking about the dress." I laughed, a tired, breathless sound. "The one on the floor? The way you looked in it. Before the wine. Before the cold." He shifted his weight, his leg pressing firmly between mine. "You looked like a queen." "I felt like an imposter," I admitted. "Diamonds and silk. That's not me. I'm dirt under the fingernails and aprons." "No," Nicholas said fiercely. "That's where you're wrong. The silk is just wrapping. The diamond is carbon under pressure. That's you. You're the strongest thing in this room." He kissed me then. It wasn't like the kiss in the car. That had been adrenaline and showmanship. This was slow. It was gratitude and reverence. He kissed me like I was the only source of oxygen in the room. My hands found his shoulders, sliding over the smooth muscle. "Nicholas, I'm here. Don't let go." "Never." We didn't have sex. It wasn't the time, and the floor was too hard, the situation too precarious. But the intimacy of lying half-naked with him, skin to skin, keeping each other alive, was more profound than any physical act. It was a binding contract. Around 6 a.m., the wind outside seemed to die down. Nicholas sat up, groaning as his stiff muscles protested. He looked at the server console. "I have enough feeling in my hands to type," he said. He pulled himself up and sat at the desk chair. I watched him work, the blue light reflecting off his bare back. He typed furiously, lines of code scrolling down the screen. "Got you," he muttered, isolating the external port, rerouting the admin access. He hit enter with a decisive strike. System reboot initiated. Climate control, online. Perimeter seals, engaging. A distant mechanical whirring echoed through the walls. The windows were closing. "It's done." Nicholas exhaled, slumping back in the chair. "I've cut the remote access. They can't get back in." He turned to me, extending his hand. "Let's go check the damage." We dressed quickly in the damp clothes. It was unpleasant, but necessary to leave the room. Walking back into the living room was like walking into a disaster zone. Snow had drifted halfway across the Persian rug. The temperature was still freezing, but I could hear the vents kicking on, blasting hot air. The windows were sealed shut. The winter garden was a tragedy. The tropical plants were black and wilted, shocked to death by the frost. The ficus tree I had cleaned was drooping, its leaves brown. I walked over to the glass door. "They're dead," I said softly. Nicholas came up behind me, wrapping his dry blazer, which he had grabbed from the coat closet, around my shoulders. "We'll replant," he said. "Everything. It takes years to grow a tree like that," I said. "Then we start today," he replied. He turned me around to face him. The morning light was gray and weak, filtering through the snow-streaked windows. We looked like wrecks, hair messy, clothes ruined, eyes shadowed with fatigue. "Go take a hot shower," Nicholas ordered gently. "A real one. I'll make coffee, and then I'm going to make a phone call," he said, his eyes shifting to the horizon where the sun was trying to break through. "I'm going to call every favor I have. I'm going to drain their accounts, burn their remaining assets, and drive them out of this city." He paused, looking at the dead garden. "They killed my plants," he said, a dark humor touching his lips. "Now it's personal." I smiled, despite everything. The plants were personal. The dress was business. "Go." He nudged me toward the hallway. As I walked toward the master bathroom, he insisted I use his, as it had the steam function. I looked back. Nicholas was standing amidst the snow in his living room, shirtless, holding a phone to his ear. He didn't look defeated. He looked like a king standing in the ruins of a battlefield, planning his conquest. I turned the water on as hot as I could stand it. As the steam filled the shower, washing away the cold and the fear, I made a decision. I wasn't going to just replant the garden. I was going to help him burn down the weeds. When I stepped out of the shower, wrapped in a thick robe, Nicholas was waiting in the bedroom. He had changed into jeans and a sweater, civilian clothes. He held 2 mugs of coffee. "Report from the field," he said, handing me a mug. "The police are treating the warehouse fire as arson, but the evidence is inconclusive. My contacts in the precinct lost the file. And the hack? Traced to a server farm in Macau. Untouchable. But it confirms it was them." He sat on the edge of the bed. "Emily, there's something else." "What?" "I found the access point they used to get into the system," he said. "It wasn't a brute force hack. They had a keylogger." "A what?" "A program that records keystrokes. Someone installed it physically, inside this apartment." I froze, the coffee cup halfway to my lips. "But nobody comes in here. You said the staff is vetted." "They are," Nicholas said. "But 3 months ago, before you came, I had a maintenance crew in here to fix the HVAC. Green Dragon has a subsidiary that does HVAC repair." My eyes widened. "They've been planning this for months, since before the flowers, since before me." "Yes," Nicholas said. "But they waited until last night to trigger it. They waited until you were here." "Why?" "Because they wanted us together," Nicholas said, his voice grim. "They wanted to take out the king and the queen on the same chessboard." "They missed," I said. "They missed," Nicholas agreed. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the frozen city. "And now it's our turn to move." He turned back to me, and the look in his eyes was terrifying and beautiful. "Get dressed, Emily. We're going to the office." "The office?" "My real office," he said. "We're going to look at the Green Dragon logistics map you drew, and you're going to show me exactly where their weak points are." I set the coffee down. The fear was gone. In its place was a cold, hard resolve. "Give me 5 minutes," I said. "Take 10, he replied. "We have all day. And for the rest of their short lives, they are going to wish the cold had killed us." The map glowing on the monitors of Nicholas's home office was a digital reconstruction of the Aurora Industrial Park. But to me, it looked like a graveyard of my childhood memories. I traced the perimeter of the largest structure with my finger, leaving a faint smudge on the expensive screen. "Here," I said, my voice steady despite the fatigue dragging at my eyelids. "This is the old drainage outflow. When I was a kid, my dad used to bring me here to pick up bulk orders of peat moss. I used to play near the creek while they loaded the truck. There's a grate here, behind the rhododendron nursery. It leads directly into the sub-basement where they keep the heavy machinery. Nicholas leaned over my shoulder, his presence a wall of heat against my back. He smelled of coffee and dangerous resolve. He studied the point I was indicating, comparing it to the satellite imagery his security team had pulled. The blueprints list that as a sealed ventilation shaft, he murmured. It's not sealed, I corrected him. It's overgrown. They stopped using it for ventilation in the 90s when the EPA cracked down on chemical runoff, but they never cemented it over. If they are cooking meth or processing opioids in there, they need airflow. They probably reopened it from the inside to vent the fumes without alerting the neighbors. Nicholas straightened up, looking at me with that intensity that always made my breath hitch. You're sure? I'm sure, I said. If you try to go in through the front loading bays, they'll see you coming a mile away. The security cameras cover the entire asphalt lot. But the creek side? It's a blind spot. It always has been. He walked to the window, looking out at the snow-covered city. He had been pacing like a caged tiger since we discovered the keylogger on his system. The knowledge that the Yamaguchi clan had been watching us, listening to us, inside his own home, had stripped away the last layers of his civilized veneer. He wasn't a CEO anymore. He was a warlord preparing a counterstrike. It's a tactical nightmare, Nicholas said, turning back to me. But if that grate is open, it's our only way to bypass their perimeter sensors. It's the only way, I agreed. Nicholas, you have to hit them where they feel safe. They think they own the supply chain. They think that warehouse is a fortress. It is a fortress, he said grimly, which is why I'm not sending a team. I'm going myself. You can't go alone, I protested, standing up. That's suicide. I'm not going alone. I'm taking my elite unit. But I am leading the breach. I need to see it with my own eyes. I need to verify that this is the hub before I burn it down. He walked over to the gun safe built into the wall of the office. As he punched in the code, the heavy steel door swung open, revealing an arsenal that made me shiver. He began selecting weapons with practiced efficiency, checking chambers, loading magazines, sliding knives into sheaths. Nicholas, I said, walking over to him. I reached out and touched his arm, stopping him from loading a fresh clip into a handgun. Promise me something. He looked down at me, his dark eyes softening slightly. Anything. The front section of the warehouse, I said. The part that faces the road. That's where they keep the legitimate inventory. The seasonal stock. Poinsettias, winter jasmine, the mother plants for the spring propagation. He frowned. Emily, I'm going there to destroy their operation. I can't worry about inventory. They are living things, I insisted. They didn't ask to be part of a drug front. If you burn the chemical lab in the back, try to spare the greenhouses in the front. Please. For me, it was a ridiculous request. I knew that. Asking a mafia boss to be careful with petunias while he was raiding a heavily armed compound. But Nicholas didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss me. He looked at my face, searching for something. And then he nodded. I'll trigger the fire suppression system in the front zones before I ignite the rear, he promised. The plants will get wet, but they won't burn. Thank you, I whispered. He leaned down and kissed me hard, a kiss that tasted of finality and fierce promise. Stay here. Monitor the police scanners. If anything goes wrong, if I don't call you by midnight, you initiate the ghost protocol. You take the cash in the safe, you go to the airfield, and you disappear. I'm not going anywhere, I said fiercely, gripping his sweater. You're coming back, you have to. You still owe me a new table. A dark chuckle escaped him. Right, the table. He pulled away, grabbed his tactical vest, and walked out the door. I listened to his footsteps fading down the hallway, the heavy thud of the elevator doors closing. And then, silence. The waiting was a physical pain. I sat in the office, surrounded by the glow of monitors. I had pulled up the live feed of the Chicago Police Dispatch on one screen and the weather radar on the other. A fresh band of snow was moving in, which was good for Nicholas. Heavy snow meant low visibility. It meant the world would be quiet. Hours bled into one another. I paced. I drank coffee that had turned cold. I replayed the layout of the Aurora facility in my mind. praying that my memory from 15 years ago hadn't failed me. What if they had sealed the grate? What if they had put a sensor there? I stared at the phone, willing it to ring. Every minute that passed felt like a tightening noose. I imagined him crawling through freezing mud, breaching steel doors, facing men who killed for a living. Please, I thought, directing the plea to the universe, to God, to anyone listening. Bring him back. I don't care about the debts. I don't care about the shop. Just bring him back. The Aurora Distribution Center was a hulking shadow against the snow-blind sky. Nicholas lay prone on the frozen bank of the creek, the icy mud soaking through his tactical gear. He didn't feel the cold. His adrenaline was a roaring fire in his veins. Through the scope of his night vision goggles, the world was a wash of green phosphorescence. He saw the grate Emily had described. It was there, hidden behind a tangle of dead rhododendrons and chain-link fencing that had rusted through. Just as she had said. Target acquired, he whispered into his comms. Breach point confirmed. Alpha team, on me. Bravo, hold the perimeter. If anything runs out the back door, put it down. He moved forward, cutting through the wire with silent shears. The grate was heavy, but the hinges were rusted almost off. He pried it open, the screech of metal masked by the howling wind. He slid into the darkness. The tunnel smelled of rot and old chemicals. It was tight, claustrophobic. But Nicholas moved with the fluidity of a predator. He crawled for 50 yards until he saw light filtering through a floor vent above him. Voices. He pushed the vent up. He was in a storage room. He pulled himself up, silent as a ghost, his weapon raised. The facility was massive. The front section, as Emily had said, was filled with rows of shelving holding legitimate gardening supplies. Bags of soil, ceramic pots, crates of dormant bulbs. But as he moved deeper, the air changed. The smell of fertilizer was replaced by the sharp, acrid sting of acetone and ammonia. He found the false wall behind a stack of pallets. It slid open to reveal the heart of the operation. It wasn't just a warehouse. It was a factory. Stainless steel vats bubbled with clear liquid. Conveyor belts moved bags of fertilizer that were being stuffed with vacuum-sealed bricks of white powder. Men in hazmat suits and armed guards with automatic rifles patrolled the catwalks. Nicholas signaled his team. Execute. The firefight was brief, violent, and surgical. Nicholas didn't waste bullets. He moved through the chaos like a wraith, taking down 2 guards before they could even raise their weapons. His men flooded the room, securing the catwalks. Within 5 minutes, the floor was theirs. The Yamaguchi technicians were zip-tied on the ground. The guards were neutralized. Nicholas walked to the main office overlooking the production floor. He kicked the door open. Inside, a terrified middle manager was trying to shred documents. Nicholas grabbed him by the collar and threw him away from the desk. The ledgers, Nicholas barked. Where are the physical ledgers? I don't know. Everything is digital, the man stammered. Nicholas pistol whipped him, a controlled strike to the temple. Don't lie to me. Kenta Yamaguchi doesn't trust the cloud. Where are the books? The man pointed to a floor safe hidden under a rug. Nicholas blew the hinges off with a breaching charge. Inside, he found them. Thick, leather-bound books and a stack of hard drives. He flipped through one. It was all there. The extortion payments from local businesses, the bribes to city officials, the shipping manifest for the drugs. This was the nail in the coffin. He shoved the evidence into his waterproof pack. Then he turned to his second-in-command. Rig it, Nicholas ordered. Thermite charges on the vats. Incendiary rounds on the chemical storage. I want this place to burn so hot they see it in Japan. Yes, boss. As his men set the charges, Nicholas walked back toward the front of the warehouse. He reached the heavy fire doors that separated the drug lab from the legitimate greenhouse supply area. He paused, his hand on the lever. He remembered Emily's voice. They are living things. Please. He looked at the control panel on the wall. Fire suppression system. Zone A. Greenhouse. He smashed the glass cover with the butt of his rifle and yanked the manual activation handle. Instantly, the sprinklers in the front section hissed to life, drenching the innocent plants in a protective curtain of water. He watched for a second to make sure the pressure was holding. Promise kept. he muttered. He stepped back into the lab. Fire in the hole. He led his team out the back exit, sprinting into the snowy night as the first explosion rocked the foundation. A massive fireball erupted behind them, turning the falling snow into sizzling steam. The chemical lab was consumed in seconds. Nicholas didn't look back. He had the books. He had the win. And he had a woman waiting for him. The elevator doors opened, and the smell hit me before I saw him. Smoke. That distinct clinging scent of burning structure and chemicals. I jumped up from the office chair, my heart hammering so hard it hurt. Nicholas stood there. He looked terrible. His face was streaked with soot, his tactical gear was torn at the shoulder, and he was soaked to the bone. But he was standing. He was whole. Nicholas! I ran to him. I didn't care about the soot or the smell. I slammed into his chest, wrapping my arms around his neck. He caught me, dropping his heavy pack to the floor, and buried his face in my hair. "I'm back," he rasped, his voice rough from the smoke. "I'm back, Emily." "You're hurt," I said, pulling back to inspect a cut on his cheek. "Just a scratch. Debris." He dismissed it. He looked at me with a wild, triumphant energy burning through his exhaustion. "We got it all. The books, the drives. The entire operation is ashes. And," I asked, hesitating, "and the front section is wet," he said, a small crooked smile breaking through the grime on his face. "I triggered the sprinklers. Your mother plants are safe. The fire doors held." I let out a sob that was half laugh. "You crazy idiot. You actually did it." "I told you," he said, gripping my waist. "I don't break promises." He walked me backward into the living room, kicking the door of the office shut. He led me to the fireplace, which was crackling with a gas fire he must have turned on remotely. Or maybe the staff had returned. No, we were alone. He reached into his jacket pocket, the inner one, protected from the water and the fire. He pulled out a single folded piece of thick paper. It was singed at the edges, smelling of smoke. "What is that?" I asked. "While I was in the safe," Nicholas said, looking at the paper. "I found the file labeled with your shop's address. It was in the extortion pile. This is the contract they were going to force you to sign. The transfer of deed. And this," he pulled out a second paper, a pink slip. "This is the debt note they bought from your bank." My knees went weak. "They bought my mortgage? They owned you, Emily," Nicholas said softly. "On paper, at least. They were going to call the loan next week. Foreclose on you." He held the papers out to the fire. The flames licked at the edges. "Nicholas," I breathed. "You don't owe them anything," he said. "Not a cent. Not a flower. Not a minute of sleep." He dropped the papers into the fire. We watched them burn. The paper curled, blackened, and turned to ash, floating up the chimney. My debt, my fear, my chains, gone. Nicholas turned to me. The firelight danced in his dark eyes, reflecting the raw, naked desire that had been simmering between us for days. Suppressed by danger and cold. "I'm dirty," he said. "I smell like smoke." "I don't care," I whispered. I reached for the buckles of his tactical vest. "Take it off." He let me undress him. I unclipped the heavy Kevlar, letting it drop to the floor with a thud. I pulled his ruined shirt over his head. His skin was hot, marked with fresh bruises and old scars, covered in a sheen of sweat and soot. He reached for me then. There was no hesitation this time. "No, we shouldn't. No, it's dangerous." The danger was burning in a warehouse in Aurora. Here, now, there was only us. He picked me up, my legs instinctively wrapping around his waist, and carried me to the bedroom. He didn't turn on the lights. The glow from the city outside and the open door to the hallway was enough. He laid me on the bed, his body following mine down, a heavy, solid weight that I welcomed. "Emily," he said, his voice a low growl against my throat. "Do you know what I thought about when the charges went off? When the roof came down?" "What?" I gasped as his hands moved over me, possessive and claiming. "I thought about the fact that I hadn't properly kissed you yet. Not really. Not without a clock ticking. We have time now," I said, running my hands through his dark, messy hair. We have all night. I'm going to ruin you for anyone else, he warned, pulling back to look at me. You know that, right? After this, there is no going back to normal. You are part of me now. I don't want normal, I told him, looking straight into his soul. I want you. I want the storm. He groaned, a sound of surrender and victory, and captured my lips. The night became a blur of sensation. It wasn't gentle. We had both been running on adrenaline and fear for too long for it to be gentle. But it wasn't violent. It was intense. It was a desperate affirmation of life. His touch was everywhere, erasing the cold of the blizzard, erasing the memory of the chrysanthemum. He worshipped my body like it was the only holy thing left in his world, and I met him. Match for match. Fire for fire. I wasn't the fragile florist anymore. I was the woman who had guided him through the dark, the woman who had ordered a hit, the woman who lay beneath the Mafia Boss and felt only power, not fear. Later, much later, we lay tangled in the sheets. The room quiet, except for our breathing. Nicholas was asleep, one arm thrown heavily over my waist, keeping me pinned to his side even in his dreams. I watched him sleep. His face was younger when he relaxed, the harsh lines of command smoothed out. I reached out and gently brushed a smudge of soot from his shoulder. I thought about the hard drive sitting on the desk in the other room. Tomorrow, Nicholas would make the calls. He would freeze their assets. He would cripple the Yamaguchi clan. We had won, but as I looked at the shadows stretching across the room, a small, cold knot formed in my stomach. We had hit them hard. We had humiliated them. Kenta Yamaguchi didn't strike me as the kind of man who accepted defeat. He was the kind of man who flipped the board when he was losing. I snuggled closer to Nicholas, seeking his warmth. We had won the battle, but the war was probably just beginning. Sleep, I whispered to the sleeping wolf beside me. Tomorrow, we fight again. But for tonight, in the safety of the penthouse, with my debts turned to ash and his arms around me, it was enough. We were alive. We were together. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I was the center of his world. The morning sun that filtered through the penthouse windows was deceptive. It painted the ruined living room in soft golden hues, making the piles of snow from the night before look like sparkling dust rather than the aftermath of a siege. Nicholas was already dressed, not in a suit, but in clean dark jeans and a black thermal shirt that hugged the muscles of his arms. He stood by the kitchen island, his phone pressed to his ear, his voice a low, terrifying rumble of satisfaction. "Freeze it all," he commanded, staring out at the skyline. The offshore accounts in the Caymans, the shell corporations in Delaware. I want every cent associated with the Green Dragon blocked by the time the market opens. If the bank manager hesitates, remind him who sits on the board of directors. He hung up and looked at me. I was sitting on a bar stool, nursing a mug of tea, wearing one of his oversized cashmere sweaters that fell to my knees. The events of the warehouse raid felt like a fever dream, but the smell of smoke still lingering faintly in his hair was real. "It's done," Nicholas said, setting the phone down. "By noon, the Yamaguchi clan won't be able to buy a pack of gum in this city. They are insolvent. Kenta is finished. He won't take that quietly," I said, a shiver running down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold draft. "You burned his legacy, Nicholas. Men like that, they don't retire. They detonate. Let him try," Nicholas said, walking over to me. He stepped between my knees, resting his hands on my thighs, his thumbs rubbing soothing circles on the denim of the jeans I had borrowed. "He has no men, no money, and no leverage. He is a ghost. Ghosts are hard to kill," I whispered. He leaned down to kiss me, a soft, lingering touch that was meant to banish my fears. But before his lips could meet mine, a sound shattered the morning calm. It wasn't his business phone. It wasn't the secure line. It was a harsh, discordant ringing coming from the pocket of his discarded tactical vest, which lay in a heap by the door. Nicholas froze. He pulled back, his eyes narrowing. He walked over to the vest and pulled out a disposable burner phone, one he only used for extreme emergencies, a number known by less than 5 people. He answered it on speaker. "Rinaldi." There was no voice on the other end. just the sound of heavy breathing and a muffled sob that made my blood turn to ice. Then, a video feed flickered onto the tiny screen. Nicholas went rigid. I slid off the stool and ran to his side, looking down at the phone in his hand. The video was shaky, filmed in a dim room. In the center of the frame, tied to a heavy wooden chair, was Sophia. She looked terrified. Her dark curly hair was matted with sweat, her lip was split, and her hands were bound behind her back with thick zip ties. She was shaking violently. A hand entered the frame, a hand wearing a gold signet ring with a dragon crest. It gripped Sophia's hair and yanked her head back, forcing her to look at the camera. "Say hello to your brother." Kenta Yamaguchi's voice sneered from behind the camera. It sounded wet, unstable, the voice of a man who had been awake for days and had lost everything. "Nick!" Sophia screamed, the sound tearing through the phone's speaker. "Nick, don't come. It's a trap, don't—" The hand struck her, a brutal backhand that silenced her and knocked the chair sideways. Nicholas let out a sound I had never heard from a human being before. It was a guttural roar of pure, animalistic agony. His hand crushed the phone so hard I thought the plastic would shatter. "Kenta!" Nicholas screamed at the screen. "If you touch her again, I will flay you alive." "You took my warehouse," Kenta's voice hissed, sounding closer to the microphone now. "You burned my birthright. You made me look weak. Now I take what is yours. An eye for an eye, Rinaldi. A legacy for a legacy." The camera panned back to Sophia, who was weeping silently now. "You have 1 hour," Kenta said. "Come to the North Harbor shipping yards. Pier 4. Alone, unarmed. If I see a single one of your guards, if I smell a cop, I put a bullet in her brain and dump her in the lake. 1 hour, Nicholas. Tick-tock." The screen went black. Nicholas stared at the blank phone for a heartbeat, his chest heaving. Then, he exploded. He turned and hurled the phone against the wall. It shattered into pieces. He grabbed a heavy crystal vase from the console table and smashed it into the mirror above the fireplace. Shards of glass rained down, reflecting the fractured monster he had become. "I'm going to kill him," Nicholas chanted, pacing the room like a caged beast. "I'm going to rip his throat out with my teeth." He stormed toward the gun safe in the office. "Nicholas, stop!" I yelled, chasing after him. "You can't go there. He said Pier 4. That's open ground. He'll have snipers. He'll kill you before you even get out of the car." "I don't care," Nicholas roared, spinning around to face me. His eyes were wild, red-rimmed with fury. "That is my sister, Emily. That is my baby sister. Do you expect me to sit here and negotiate? He has her. He wants you dead." I grabbed his arm, trying to anchor him. "If you go to the pier, you both die. That's the end game. He doesn't want money. He wants a murder-suicide." "Then I trade my life for hers," Nicholas said, his voice cracking. He ripped his arm from my grasp and punched the code into the safe. "If I have to die so she lives, I do it. That's the deal. That has always been the deal." He grabbed a handgun and shoved it into his waistband. He grabbed a knife. He was moving on instinct, blind and deaf to reason. "Nicholas, please, think," I begged, standing between him and the door. "Kenta is desperate. He's hiding. Why would he take her to a shipping pier? It's too exposed. It's too cold. Where was the video filmed?" "It doesn't matter," Nicholas shouted, trying to push past me. "It matters," I screamed back, shoving him in the chest with both hands. "Look at the video. Think, Nicholas. You're a strategist. Stop acting like a brawler. Where was she?" He stopped, breathing hard, looking down at me. "It was a room, a dark room." "Show me the backup," I demanded. "Your phone automatically backs up media files to the cloud server, right? Pull it up on the monitor. Now. We don't have time." "We have 50 minutes," I snapped. "If you drive to the pier, you die in 20. Give me 2 minutes to look at the damn video." Something in my voice, maybe the echo of the command I had used when we saved the server room, got through to him. He blinked, shaking his head as if clearing a fog. He walked to the desk and punched a key. The large monitor flickered to life. He accessed the cloud backup. The video file was there. He clicked play. Sophia's terrified face filled the massive 4K screen. "Pause," I ordered. He hit the space bar. Look at the background, I said, leaning in, my eyes scanning the blurry details behind Sophia's chair. It's not a shipping container. It's not a warehouse office. Look at the wall. Nicholas squinted. It's peeling paint. It's a dump. No, I said, stepping closer, my finger tracing the pattern on the screen. That's not paint. That's wallpaper. See the repeating pattern? It's faded, yellowed with age, but you can see the design. Blue hydrangeas intertwined with gold ivy vines. And look at the baseboard. That's mahogany wainscoting, hand-carved. You don't find hand-carved mahogany in a shipping yard. So he's in a house, Nicholas said, pacing again. An abandoned house. That could be anywhere in the city. No, not anywhere, I murmured, my mind racing back through years of estate sales, auctions, and floral conventions. I knew that pattern. I had seen it before. I closed my eyes, visualizing the memory. 3 years ago, a liquidation auction for a historic property that had been tied up in probate court for a decade. I had gone hoping to buy some vintage crystal vases. I had walked through the lobby, smelling the dust and the decay of former grandeur. I opened my eyes. It's the Hotel Blackwell. Nicholas froze. The Blackwell? That place has been condemned since 2010. It's a rot in the middle of the historic district. I went to the auction, I said, pointing at the screen. That wallpaper, the Victorian Garden Collection. It was custom commissioned for the Blackwell in 1920. I remember because I wanted to buy a roll for the shop, but it was glued to the walls. And look, I pointed to the edge of the frame. That brass sconce shaped like a calla lily. They are unique to the Blackwell suites. Kenta isn't at the pier. The pier is the kill zone where he wants you to go. He's hiding in the hotel. Nicholas stared at the screen, then at me. The wild panic in his eyes was replaced by a razor-sharp focus. The monster was back, but this time, it was a calculating one. The Blackwell, he whispered. The Yamaguchi used a shell company to buy a block of distressed assets in that district last year. I thought it was for tax write-offs. It's a fortress, I said. Thick walls, soundproofed rooms, underground service tunnels. It's the perfect place to hide a hostage. Nicholas grabbed his tactical radio. Team leader, assemble the unit. We have a location change. Forget the pier. The target is the Hotel Blackwell. I want a silent perimeter established in 10 minutes. We breach from the service entrance in the alley. He turned to me, and for a second, his face crumbled. He grabbed my face in his hands and kissed me hard on the forehead. You just saved her life, he rasped. If I had gone to the pier. Go get her, I said, pushing him toward the door. Bring her home. Stay on the line, he ordered, handing me an earpiece. I want you on comms. You guide us. You know the layout? I know the lobby and the first floor suites, I said, putting the earpiece in. Go. Nicholas didn't look back. He ran out the door, and this time, he wasn't running to his death. He was running to a war he intended to win. The next 30 minutes were an agony of static and silence. I sat in the office, staring at the map of the Hotel Blackwell I had pulled up on the screen. It was a labyrinth of 300 rooms, but based on the video, the wainscoting suggested a suite. The expensive rooms were on the second floor. Alpha 1 in position. Nicholas's voice crackled in my ear. He sounded calm, deadly. Perimeter secure. No movement on the street. They are expecting me at the harbor. Breach point is the kitchen delivery door, I said into the mic, my voice shaking slightly. South side. It leads directly to the service elevator. Copy. Breaching in 3, 2, 1. I heard the dull thud of a suppressed door breach. Then the sound of boots on concrete. We are inside, Nicholas whispered. Clear. Moving to the stairwell. Elevator is too risky. I closed my eyes, visualizing the hotel. The grand staircase would be blocked or trapped. The service stairs were narrow. Second floor, I said. The suites with that wallpaper are the garden suites. Rooms 201 through 210. Roger, approaching the second landing. Suddenly, the silence broke. Contact! Someone yelled. Gunfire erupted in my ear. It was loud, chaotic. I flinched, gripping the edge of the desk. Target left! Suppression fire! Nicholas was shouting commands. Move up! Don't let them pin us! Nicholas! I screamed uselessly. I'm good, he barked back, over the sound of automatic fire. 2 tangos down, moving to the hallway. They know we're here. The sound of the firefight shifted. I heard wood splintering, heavy footsteps running. Room 204, Nicholas yelled. I hear shouting inside. Breach! Breach! A massive explosion echoed through the line, a flashbang. Clear left! Clear right! Then, a voice I recognized. Kenta, screaming in Japanese, frantic, terrified. Drop it! Nicholas roared. Drop the weapon or I will paint this room with your brains. Back off! Kenta screamed, his voice cracking. I'll kill her. I swear I'll do it. Look at me, Kenta, Nicholas demanded, his voice dropping to that terrifyingly low register. The pier is empty. Your men are dead. My team is in the hallway. You have nowhere to go. You lost. I am a dragon, Kenta shrieked. You are a corpse, Nicholas corrected. I heard a scuffle, a muffled gunshot, then a heavy thud, like a body hitting the floor. Silence. I stopped breathing. The static hissed in my ear. Nicholas? I whispered. Sophia, look at me. Nicholas's voice came through, gentle now, broken. It's okay. It's okay, baby. I've got you. I heard sobbing, deep, wrenching sobs. Status, the team leader's voice cut in. Target neutralized. Hostage secure. We are moving out. I slumped forward onto the desk, burying my face in my hands. Tears streamed down my face, soaking the sleeves of Nicholas's sweater. Emily? Nicholas's voice was back on the comms. Emily, are you there? I'm here, I choked out. Is she? She's safe, he said. We're coming home. Clear the living room. She's going to need space. I'm ready, I said. Come home. The wait for them to return was different from the wait for the raid. It wasn't fearful. It was numb. I moved mechanically, clearing the broken glass from the mirror Nicholas had smashed. I turned up the heat. I prepared blankets on the sofa. I made tea, lots of it, with shaking hands. The elevator chimed. I stood by the fireplace, bracing myself. Nicholas walked in first. He was covered in dust, his black shirt torn, a smear of blood on his forehead that wasn't his. He looked exhausted, older by 10 years, but his eyes were clear. He didn't come to me. He turned and extended his hand toward the elevator. Sophia stepped out. She looked small, so incredibly small, wrapped in a large tactical jacket one of the men must have given her. Her face was bruised, her lips swollen, and her wrists were raw where the zip ties had been. She was trembling, her eyes darting around the room as if expecting another trap. It's okay, Nicholas said softly, guiding her in. You're safe. We're in the tower. Nobody gets in here. Sophia looked at him. Then she looked at me. I didn't know what to expect. I was the stranger, the florist who was sleeping with her brother, the woman who had been part of the reason this war started. But Sophia didn't see a stranger. She looked at me and her eyes filled with fresh tears. You, she rasped, her voice hoarse from screaming. You knew about the wallpaper. Nicholas must have told her on the ride over. I like vintage things, I said, a weak smile trembling on my lips. I'm glad I have a good memory. Sophia didn't speak. She crossed the room, moving faster than I expected, and crashed into me. I caught her, wrapping my arms around her shaking frame. She buried her face in my shoulder, sobbing uncontrollably. It wasn't the polite hug of an acquaintance. It was the desperate cling of a survivor thanking the lifeline. Thank you, she cried into my neck. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. I held her tight, stroking her matted hair. I looked up and met Nicholas's eyes over her shoulder. He was watching us with an expression of such raw, unguarded emotion that it took my breath away. He wasn't looking at me with desire, or gratitude, or even love. He was looking at me like I was the foundation of his entire world. He walked over and wrapped his massive arms around both of us, sandwiching us together. He kissed the top of Sophia's head. Then he kissed my forehead, resting his chin there. Family, he whispered, the words sounding like a vow. We stood there for a long time, a tangle of bruised bodies and frayed nerves in the middle of the luxury penthouse. The war was over. Kenta was dead. The threat was gone. But as I held Mafia Rinaldi, feeling her tears soak my shirt, I realized something. I wasn't just under Nicholas's protection anymore. I was part of the pack. I had earned my place not by marriage or by blood, but by fire. I need a shower, Sophia sniffled finally, pulling back but keeping hold of my hand. And I need to burn these clothes. I have sweatpants, I said, and really expensive shampoo. Come on. I led her toward the guest suite, my old room. Nicholas stayed in the living room. As I reached the doorway, I looked back. He was standing by the window, looking out at the city. He pulled the gun from his waistband and set it on the table. Then he pulled out the knife. Then the earpiece. He was disarming himself. He looked at me. He didn't say a word, but the message was clear. You did this. You fixed this. I nodded, a silent acknowledgement, and turned back to Sophia. Let's get you cleaned up, I said. And then we're going to order the greasiest pizza in Chicago. Sophia managed a weak, watery laugh. God, yes. No more organic kale, please. Deal, I said. I helped her into the bathroom, turning on the water, finding clean towels. I acted the part of the big sister I had never been, and in caring for her, the last of my own fear evaporated. I wasn't the damsel. I wasn't the victim. I was the one who knew the wallpaper. I was the one who saw what the soldiers missed. Nicholas Rinaldi might be the king of Chicago, but he needed a queen who noticed the details. And as I listened to the water running and the city breathing below us, I knew I was ready for the crown. The silk blindfold tied around my eyes wasn't tight, but it was effective. It reduced my world to a series of sensations. The hum of the car engine beneath me, the scent of expensive leather, and the warm, heavy weight of Nicholas's hand resting on my knee. We have been driving for 20 minutes, I said, trying to gauge our location by the turns the car had taken. If you're taking me to the airport to deport me for being a terrible cook, just tell me. Nicholas laughed. A low, resonant sound that vibrated through the quiet cabin of the SUV. It was a sound I had heard more in the last 3 weeks than I probably had in my entire life before him. The tension that used to coil around him like razor wire had loosened. He was still dangerous. I knew that better than anyone. But the constant grinding pressure of the war was gone. You're not a terrible cook, he corrected. Your risotto is excellent. Your coffee, however, is a crime against Italy. I use a French press, I defended. It's sophisticated. It's sludge, he countered, his thumb tracing circles on my denim-clad knee. Relax, Emily. We're almost there. Where is there? If I told you, I wouldn't need the blindfold. I leaned back against the seat, surrendering to the mystery. 3 weeks. It had been exactly 21 days since the siege at the Hotel Blackwell. 21 days since the police found Kenta Yamaguchi's body and ruled it a gang-related altercation before promptly closing the file. 21 days since Nicholas had wiped the Green Dragon holdings off the map of Chicago's economy. The city felt different now. The heavy, oppressive winter was finally breaking. The snow piles were melting into slush, revealing the gray pavement underneath, and the air coming through the car vents smelled like rain and wet earth. It smelled like spring. The car slowed down, turning onto a street that sounded busier. I heard the distant rattle of the L train and the honking of taxis. Then, the car turned again, crossing what sounded like a cobblestone or brick driveway, and came to a smooth halt. We're here, Nicholas announced. I reached for the blindfold, but his hand caught my wrist gently. Not yet, he said. Wait until we're inside. I heard his door open, then the crunch of his boots on the pavement. A moment later, my door was pulled open, and the cool, damp air of the city rushed in. Nicholas took my hand, guiding me out. I stumbled slightly on the curb, but his arm was instantly around my waist, steadying me. I've got you, he murmured. Step up. I stepped up onto a sidewalk. The sounds of the city were louder here, echoing off tall buildings. Nicholas guided me forward. I heard the jingle of keys, the heavy click of a deadbolt turning, and then the chime of a bell. A bright, cheerful sound that triggered a deep, instinctual memory in my chest. We walked inside. The air changed instantly. It was still, cool, and smelled clean. It smelled of fresh paint, sawdust, and something else. Something faint and sweet. "Okay," Nicholas said, standing behind me, his hands resting on my shoulders. "Open your eyes." I reached up and untied the silk knot. The fabric fell away, and I blinked, adjusting to the light. I wasn't in the penthouse. I wasn't in my old cramped shop on 4th Street. I was standing in the center of a cathedral of light. It was a commercial space, cavernous and airy, with high tin ceilings painted a crisp, matte white. The floor was polished concrete, industrial, but warm. To my left, an entire wall was exposed brick, cleaned and sealed, giving the space a historic, textured feel. To my right, a wall of floor-to-ceiling windows flooded the room with natural light, overlooking a bustling street in the River North district. But it was the fixtures that made my breath catch. Custom-built shelving units made of reclaimed wood and black iron pipe lined the walls. A massive, white marble island, twice the size of the one Nicholas had smashed, sat in the center of the room, gleaming under modern pendant lights. Behind it was a walk-in floral cooler with glass doors that spanned 20 feet, the kind of professional setup I had only ever seen in magazines. It was empty of flowers, mostly, but the potential of the space was overwhelming. It screamed success. It screamed permanence. "Nicholas," I whispered, spinning around to face him. "What is this?" He was leaning against the closed door, hands in his pockets, watching me with a look of intense satisfaction. "This," he said, "is prime real estate. Former art gallery. I bought the building last week." "You bought the building?" I repeated, my brain struggling to process the scale of it. "For what? A front?" "No fronts," he said, pushing off the door and walking toward me. "No laundering. No hidden compartments. Just a business. Specifically, your business." He gestured to the vast empty space. "Your old shop was compromised. The lease was toxic, the location was dangerous, and quite frankly, the plumbing was a disaster. You needed a fresh start. This is it." "Nicholas, I can't afford rent in River North," I said, my pragmatism fighting with my awe. "The square footage alone. My overhead would be astronomical. I'd have to sell orchids made of solid gold." "You don't have to pay rent," a new voice called out from the back of the shop. I turned. Emerging from a doorway that I assumed led to an office or storage area was Sophia. She looked healthy. The bruises on her face had faded to faint yellow shadows that were easily hidden with makeup. But today, she wasn't wearing any. She was wearing ripped jeans, a paint-splattered t-shirt, and had her curly hair tied up in a messy bun. She was holding a clipboard and looking entirely at home. "Sophia?" I asked. "What are you doing here?" "Supervising," she grinned, walking over to give me a quick hug. "Nick has terrible taste in lighting. He wanted to put in fluorescent strips. I told him if he did that, you'd kill him. Flowers need full-spectrum LEDs. So, I overruled him." She gestured to the warm, glowing lights above us. "You're welcome." I looked from Sophia to Nicholas. The fact that she was here, laughing, arguing about light fixtures, was a miracle in itself. The trauma of the Blackwell was there. I could see it in the way she stayed close to the wall, the way her eyes checked the front door when a car drove by. But she wasn't broken. She was rebuilding, just like we were. "Explain," I said to Nicholas, crossing my arms. "Sophia said I don't pay rent." "Why?" "Because you own the building," Nicholas said simply. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. Not car keys, not apartment keys. A heavy brass master key ring. He walked over and pressed them into my hand. "Ground floor is commercial," he explained, pointing around the room. "Emily's Botanicals, or whatever you want to call it. Second and third floors are renovated office lofts. I've already secured 5-year leases with a tech startup and an architectural firm. The rental income from the upstairs covers the property tax, the utilities, and the maintenance for the entire building, with a significant profit margin left over." He closed my fingers over the keys. "You don't have overhead, Emily. You have an asset. You can sell 1 daisy a month, and you'll still be in the black." I stared at the keys in my hand. They felt heavy, cold, and real. You did this, I whispered. While you were dismantling an empire, you were buying real estate for me. I multitask. He shrugged, but his eyes were serious. I told you I would burn your debts. This is the other half of that promise. You never have to worry about a supplier squeezing you again. You never have to worry about a landlord. This is yours. Nobody can take it from you. Not the bank, not the Yakuza, not even me. Why? I asked, my voice trembling. Nicholas, this is millions of dollars. Because you saved my family, he said, his voice dropping to that low, intimate register that made the rest of the world disappear. Because you stood in a freezing server room and saved my life. Because you are the only person in the world who knows what I am and doesn't look at me with fear. He stepped closer, his hand coming up to cut my cheek. And because I want to see what you can grow when you aren't afraid of the winter. I looked at him, this man who spoke in violence and grand gestures, and I realized that this wasn't charity. It was an offering. He wasn't trying to buy me. He was trying to build a fortress around me that was made of light and legal contracts instead of concrete and guns. I don't know what to say, I admitted. Say yes, Sophia piped up from the counter, where she was pretending to check inventory lists. And hire me. I need a part-time job that doesn't involve my brother's security team breathing down my neck. I'm good at arrangements. I have an eye for color. I laughed, wiping a sudden tear from my cheek. You're hired, but you're starting on bucket duty. Everyone starts on buckets. Deal, Sophia beamed. Come, Nicholas said, taking my hand again. There's one more thing. He led me toward the back of the shop, past the cooler, to a heavy oak door. He unlocked it with his own key. This is the private office, he said. Soundproofed, reinforced door, separate secure server for your files. We walked inside. It was a beautiful room, lined with bookshelves and smelling of leather. A large mahogany desk sat in the center, a replacement for the table he had smashed. But this one was grander, more permanent. But it wasn't the furniture that caught my eye. On the wall behind the desk, framed in a simple, elegant shadow box, was a flower. It was the white chrysanthemum. The petals were dried now, brittle and preserved forever in resin. The red tips, the paint that had terrified me so much 3 weeks ago, were still vibrant, a stark contrast to the faded white. It didn't look like a thread anymore. It looked like a piece of art, a relic of a war that was won. I walked over to it, staring at the thing that had started it all. You kept it, I said softly. I told you, Nicholas said, standing beside me. It signifies a funeral, but not yours. He traced the edge of the frame. I kept it to remind myself. Every time I look at this, I remember the moment I almost lost you, and I remember that we won. It's a trophy, Emily. It's proof that we survived the fire. I looked from the flower to him. He looked relaxed here, in this space he had built for me. The shadows that usually clung to him were gone, chased away by the sunlight streaming in from the shop. You know, I said, leaning against the desk. In the language of flowers, a white chrysanthemum doesn't just mean death. In some cultures it means truth and loyalty. Is that so? He asked, stepping into my space, his hands finding my waist. Yes, I said, looping my arms around his neck. And red means passion. I think we covered all the bases. We missed one, he murmured, his eyes dropping to my lips. Which one? The future, he said. I don't know what flower represents that. I think, I said, looking over his shoulder at the sunlit shop, at Sophia humming to herself as she unpacked a box of vases, and at the wide-open world outside the window. I think it's whatever we decide to plant. Nicholas smiled, a real, unguarded smile that reached his eyes and stayed there. Then we better get started. I have a lot of dirt to dig. You're not digging anything in those jeans, I teased. Try me, he challenged. I'm very good with my hands. I know, I whispered, the memory of the nights in the penthouse flooding back. He kissed me then, right there in the office of my new life. It wasn't a desperate kiss, or a fearful one. It was steady. It tasted of coffee and promise. It tasted like home. We broke apart when Sophia called out from the front room. "Hey, the delivery truck is here. Someone ordered 500 stems of hydra something?" Sophia's voice carried from the front room, brighter than it had any right to be after everything that had happened at the Blackwell. She still startled at sirens and slammed doors, still slept with a lamp on more nights than she admitted. But she was here, alive and arguing with wholesalers and mispronouncing hydrangeas, and that felt like its own kind of miracle. "Hydrangeas," I corrected, pulling away from Nicholas, though I kept his hand in mine. "Blue ones, for the opening." "Blue?" Nicholas raised an eyebrow. "I thought you hated blue." "I hated blue when I was hiding," I said, squeezing his hand. "Blue is calm. Blue is peace. I think I'm ready for a little peace." "You have it," he promised. "As long as I'm standing, you have peace. And you?" I asked, looking at him one last time before going out to meet the delivery. "What do you have, Nicholas? You gave me a building, a business, a future. What do you get out of this deal?" Nicholas looked at the framed chrysanthemum, then at his sister laughing in the other room, and finally back at me. "I get the florist," he said simply. And that was the only answer that mattered. I smiled, let go of his hand, and walked out into the light of the shop. "Come on, boss. Those hydrangeas aren't going to trim themselves." Nicholas Rinaldi, the king of Chicago, the man who burned down warehouses and toppled empires, rolled up his sleeves and followed me. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "We had a garden to grow,